What
Howdy.
up? How you doing?
Uh let's see here. Look at that. See? Some other ones here. There
Yep.
we see.
I have a hard time with that one missing my finger, but it does work okay. How do you do the balloons?
That was it two thumbs? Wait. No, the balloons was it just one piece?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, one it's one.
Okay. All right. Well, how
So
you doing, man?
I'm all right. Tired.
Yeah, me too.
That time of year.
Sure is.
So
Hot and humid, and the honey's off, at least for
yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
just kind of in that time of the year when you just gotta kind of do just the grind part of the year. It feels like right
I
now.
know. I know. I know it's just you pull the honey off and then it's like, boy, can we rest? No.
That's right. Always something to
You
do.
know? Yeah. I haven't been back over though. I pulled my honey I forget what day it was. Saturday, maybe? Saturday. Uh and I actually got a little bit more than what I thought I would. So that was a surprise. Uh and
That's good.
then and then so I go down into my basement and I was looking at the buckets that I had because I had a couple buckets sitting behind my bottling tank and they're just sitting there. So I lifted them out and I thought, well, hang on, there's some weight in some of these. What do
Uh-oh.
I have here? So in the one bucket, it was little under half of honey from last year. So I had 20 some pounds, probably 25 pounds of honey in that one. And then I lift up another bucket and I'm like, what the heck do I have in here? And there was probably 20 pounds of fall honey. I found
Wow.
probably 40 pounds of honey that was just sitting
Well,
there.
that works. Wow.
And I'm like, well, okay, I'll take it. So, and then I had well, it's sitting right over there. I can grab it. Here, hang on one second. I'm gonna get something. So this that
Looks like a heating element of some kind.
it looks like a heating element that should be in a bottling tank. Uh, yeah, well, this
It's
doesn't
not.
work.
Hmm.
So,
Well, that's not
so
good.
my bottling tank is
Oh, hey.
drained. It's got a little bit of honey in it that I was going to warm it up because I need to make some hot honey. The honey that I have in that bottling tank was the honey that's specific for my hot honey. So, and it's solid as a rock. So I'm going to have to scoop it out of there, and I'll just heat it on the stove just to you know melt it on down. But yeah, my bottling tank took a dive, and I think I used that thing for 6 months.
Well, I got to say, mine is going strong after what, 7 years, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. So
Yeah, and
not to
and
rub it in or anything.
I won't dwell on it, but when I got that bottling tank, I hadn't used it, and then there was a recall or something on the control units. So yeah, I know. Don't even don't. I know. I see it. I see it.
Greg's proud of me.
Greg
He's proud of
is,
me for my bottling tank, but he doesn't like my extractors, I don't think.
but
But
I
I
had
don't
to
care.
I had to rip this apart to replace the guts of it because there was a defective part, and of course mine was in like the batch. So I hadn't even used it and then had to replace stuff. And then I used it last year after I extracted. So probably what, from July, August in there, up until December, my last market. And after that, I flipped it off. I thought, well, I'm not going to leave it on. I had a little bit of honey. I just flipped it off. I thought, I'm not going to run the thing. And when I was pulling all those buckets of honey out, I thought, well, I got to turn this thing on. That way I can get this honey melted on down. I flipped the switch on and I heard this bang, this loud sound. And I thought, oh, that don't sound good. And then it just quit. So, oh, well, it happens. So, what do you say, Tom?
Just living life, everything's good.
Yeah.
We have a couple of, actually 3 Maxant bottling tanks. And I opted actually not to go with really large ones because I don't. So my thought process is this. Not that it's right, not that it's wrong, but it works for me. I have one that's 16 gallon, and I use that for our bourbon barrel aged. And then we usually do a light extracted and a amber, or we call it dark extracted. It's not really dark. It's more like a medium amber. And so we have 3 tanks set up, one for each one of them. And the other 2, I think, are, what are those, Maxant 24s or 25s? I don't remember.
I think 25, I think.
Yeah. So I don't know. We usually keep ours in, kind of like Bruce does, in 5-gallon food grade buckets until we need them. And then we put them in a warmer right at about 100 degrees for a day. And then, if it's crystallized anyway, and then we put it into the bottling tanks. And I'll warm it up just a little bit, usually about 100, maybe 101 too. And then as soon as I can get all the crystals out of it, I back it down to about 89 degrees and just let it sit there. And we usually keep anywhere from, most of the time I actually don't keep 25 gallons in each one of the tanks. It's usually anywhere between 10 and 20, depending on what we have going on. So, I mean, they work well. I haven't had any problem with them. So,
yeah,
they do work well.
This, and then when I did, I didn't have oil in it. Like, some people say put oil in it. I had distilled water. I've got a distilled water maker because I got a saltwater fish tank that I have to use distilled water with.
Oh,
so
nice.
I even checked all the. I mean, look at how clean the rods in that are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just defective.
Yeah, there's something just defective in it. But I got a new unit coming. I mean, it's not going to cost me anything. Just it's the
frustration.
It is because I didn't have that thing on any type of like a lift. So I had to sit there with this small little tray, draining the liquid out of it, and it was a pain in the neck, and now I have it, I've lifted it up and I've got it sitting on, there's 3 buckets that are positioned so it's sitting upright, but I need to get some type of like a stand so that it's elevated like a foot or so off the ground. Just to make it easier. But I learned my lesson there. I mean, I should just do what like Mike Berry did because he's got a lift. It's from, I think he got everything from Harbor Freight, and it's on wheels, so he can actually like wheel his around. And you
a lift for what? For what? Your bottling tank is on the floor?
Yeah, for the bottling tank. Yeah, it's on the mine's. It was just sitting on the floor.
Why is it on the floor?
Because I've got this connector on it that I can.
Oh yeah, that's right. You use that fancy gadget. Okay, I got you. So I couldn't fill my bottles if mine was sitting on the floor. But
yeah,
I got you.
Yeah, mine is I've got that speed fill, and that's what I use to fill everything.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
So. But it's I mean, everything's all right, though. It's warranted, so it's just frustration. That's all, But I do have to get over. Well, before we get into all that, what's been going on in the last week? What's happening down in Alabama?
Well, I got mite treatments in. I think I may have mentioned last week that I had a bucket disaster in the honey room, in the bucket room. We had the 5 buckets stacked. And just for those who may not have been on here, we we stack our buckets 5 high. And of course, people tell me I can't do that. And I get a little cocky. So I do it all the time. Hadn't had a problem before. And sure enough, what happened was I get my 90 mil buckets from ePackage Supply, and the lids that come are very durable, very sturdy. And I've done that the last 2 or 3 years, and the buckets never even, like, it doesn't even phase them at all to stack them that high, five buckets high. But we ran out of buckets because we had a really nice honey harvest this year. And so we ran out of lids. We ran out of buckets. Well, I had some old 70 mil buckets that I was kind of trying to cycle out, but I didn't get them cycled out, thank goodness. And so I used those, which the buckets weren't the problem. But then I ran out of lids as well. And the partner, Rusty, that I do the harvest at his place, we do that together. He had some lids that were a little bit thinner around the edge. They just weren't the 90 mil super tough ones. And I don't even know if they were 70 mil. They just weren't designed to stack high, put it that way. And so when we unloaded them, I tried to make sure that we had the thinner rimmed buckets, lids on the top. Obviously, that would delete the problem or get rid of the problem. But we somehow, right before I started really watching it close, one of those ended up on the bottom of a 5 stack of buckets, and it just kind of degloved down in there. It just kind of, oh, my light just went off for some reason up there. Anyway, it just kind of degloved, basically peeled it off the top and pushed the lid down. And so we had that piston action that pushed the honey out all in the honey room. So we had to take all the buckets out of there. And initially the bees were having a hard time finding it. It's just kind of the room. They have to go kind of in a dark area in the barn and go around a corner, get into the room where they were. But my brother actually took a little bit of honey and kind of just drizzled it out of the door a little bit so they could smell it. And now they cleaned it up better. This looks like it's cleaner now than it was before. They cleaned it up really good. There's some dead bees in there, just a few. That always tends to happen. But the carpet itself, it's on this industrial carpet in there, and it actually looks cleaner than it has before. So pretty impressed with what those bees did. But they cleaned it up really nice, and so now I gotta go in there. I think I might go ahead and steam clean it. I may not. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but get those buckets back in there as soon as I can. So, but what we did this week, the main task this week was to get the mite treatments on the hives. The Monday and like the week after we harvested, the bee inspector went around on bee yards. I asked him to, and he was more than willing to do it. He went around and took samples of my bees and all my bee yards, and we had a mite load. It wasn't ridiculous. A couple of the yards were pretty good. 3 of the yards are pretty good. The northern route, which were actually my bees that I would consider my weaker bees, the mite counts were actually really quite good. And then the stronger yards where the huge tower hives I had that were stacked up with honey down in Slocum and Applin Farms had more mite pressure. It wasn't ridiculous. It wasn't as high as it was last year, even close to that. But so my goal was to get mite treatments on anyway. So I had a friend, a commercial guy, Tyler Walker down here, he had purchased a pallet of Baroxan strips. And so I went and of course, when you buy it by the pallet, you get a really good deal on it. It's much better than paying full price, like what you order 1 pack for. And so I got a really good deal on that, and bought 900 strips, and I ended up with 5. I had 5 strips extra. So I anticipated pretty good on what I needed, and we put a full dose. I think when I did it in the spring, I think I did in the double deeps, I would put 4 strips in the bottom and 2 in the top box. So but you're really supposed to put 4, I think, in each 10 frame box. 1 frame, 1 strip for every 2.5 frames.
Right.
We had quite the adventure though. The bees were so strong, and some of those colonies I haven't broken apart since we started stacking honey supers. So like late March, early April, they've been and you've seen how strong they are in my videos, just strong hives building up, just boiling with bees, full of bees. And so what do bees do when they have like 2 to 3 months without you cracking the boxes open? They tend to, glue things together. And so even though my bees are much nicer than they used to be, even nice bees don't like it when you start ramming a hive tool in there and yanking and pulling and tugging and twisting, trying to get the top box off, the second box off. And so last Thursday off, and I did the northern route. I got those bees done, and it like took most of the day, and it would just wore me out just because it's a lot. It's real physical too. First of all, some of those deep boxes, I'm glad. Fortunately, some of them are full of honey, mostly honey, a little bit of brood in the middle, but the bottom boxes have quite a bit of brood. So everything, the boxes just look like they're set up kind of perfectly. But I just had to battle with them all the way through the day. And so Saturday, my Hives for Heroes mentee, Thomas, my most recent Hives for Heroes mentee, he had a recent surgery, but he agreed to go help. He wanted to come help. And so he came along. So he can't pick up anything heavy. And some of those boxes probably weigh 60, 70 pounds or more. My son-in-law went, and he's 6'2", like 220, 225, 230, whatever he weighs. I'm not sure, but he's a big guy, big, strong fella. He's a mechanic, and he's just a big old strong guy. And he hasn't done a lot of bees, but he's done a few things with me. But the bees weren't happy, just put it that way. They kind of got a little chippy. We started yanking. We're moving kind of fast. So Thomas would go through, he'd crack the lid, he put the first 4 strips in, and then Ryan and I were going along behind for the most part, and we were taking the top box off and putting strips on the bottom, and then putting it back on, and yanking those boxes apart. The bees got a little feisty with us, and they weren't super happy. But we got all the treatments on. The bees are looking extremely strong. Brian, I sent you some pictures of how the hives are looking. I sent them to you on your phone. I didn't send them to you just now, but they were looking really good. And I don't know, maybe we could put some of those up here, Brian, if you could pull them off your phone, or I can resend them to you. But it's just so much fun. But we were absolutely wiped out. My son-in-law, he got lit up pretty good. The bees found him, and the jackets I'm using now, I'm using the I like the jackets I've used in the past, but right now I'm using the Sting Stopper jackets, and they've got around the wrist. I use the nitrile gloves, and so I put the nitrile glove, I pull it up under the jacket, and then I pull the jacket over, and it velcros tight on the wrist. Well, right there where the glove and the jacket meet, there's like a kind of a crease. So the bees, they can find that spot. Really, obviously beekeeping, obviously if you pull them over that, then they're not going to get stung in the wrist. But he got stung some in the wrist, got stung a few times in the legs as well. He got quite a fair number of stings, but yeah, that's my hive. I saw that over and over and over again. We were cracking lids the other day. So yeah, it was pretty nice. They're full of bees, but
that's a beautiful when you can't see the frames.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, that's after treatments were put on. You see the treatments on them, and they kind of. But yeah, that one was a more. Hold it down a little bit, Brian. The box right there, that's the top box. So you see, that was a more typical box that we saw. You could see the frames, but they were all through those boxes, just really healthy, strong hives, and that was probably 80% of my colonies, 78% of them looked just like that. I had a few that were weak, and we combined some. We just threw some together that looked weak, but for the most part, yeah, that's just typical. That was hive after hive after hive right there. It was so much fun when you see that.
Strong colonies.
Anyway, but Riley got stung up pretty good, and so he's not really used to that. He's tough. He's a tough guy. He walked away a few times, but that night I think he had Benadryl. That was Saturday night. Sunday, got up, went to church, came home, and he asked if he could have some more. And then I was going out. We were going to a family get together last night, and he said, he injured his wrist at work before he moved here. He was living out in Utah. He injured his wrist. He said, and it's been really bothering him, but he said, my wrist doesn't hurt anymore. So the sting pain is gone, and the swelling and pain and itching is gone, but now the pain in his wrist is a lot better. So it's kind of crazy how that works. I'm not sure what the chemical reason for that is or why it works, but he just said, he's like, I don't think my wrist really isn't hurting anymore. He's like, it's still, I guess it's a little weak still, but it's not hurting anymore. So that's pretty cool. But so that's what we did. Mite treatments. We're going to leave the Varoxan in there and just see what the results are. I think that, I talked to Cayman, actually called me today, and we talked a little bit, and I think that the Varoxan is really good to certainly keep the mites from exploding and growing, but I think it'll also, if you treat properly with it, I think if you put enough in there, hopefully it'll knock the mite count down too. But we're going to find out because we're going to reassess. I do think maybe some of the colonies that were really weak that we ended up combining the boxes with their colonies, some of those may have been the ones that had the high mite counts, and so I'm not sure that on the lids. The bee inspector looked on the lids. We were going so fast I wasn't even hardly paying attention, but a couple, like one of them that had the highest mite load that he took was one of the strongest looking ones. So hopefully it'll knock the mites down and keep that one from dying out. But it was one of the ones that looked kind of like the first one you showed. It was really strong. But on the lid it said 20 plus mites. And so I think it was probably more like 30 mites, but that was by far the highest one. If you remember last year, I had a lot when the Auburn guys came down and did the inspections. I didn't do a spring treatment last year, and the mite counts in some of those bees that would have been almost a good one. Like they were just, some of them were ridiculously high. And so
Yeah.
I'm excited though. My bees have never, and we didn't have, beetle pressure is very low. Of course, with hives that look like that, the beetles aren't going to do much anyway. But the beetle pressure was so low and the only location that had a lot of beetles was Honey Hill Farm, and those bees are on sandy soil, and they're in the shade, right? They're completely in the shade. The trees have grown up over them. They've been there several years now, and so anyway, yeah, so I went ahead and put a few mite treatments in them. And so, but I was anticipating, I had all my stuff ready to go to put mite treatments in them, and I didn't see. I mean, heck, I didn't see more than, we treated one hive in Slocum that had a few beetles, but I don't know if I saw any hive that had more than, just 10 beetles in the entire day. And that's not many down here. And most of the hives didn't see any beetles at all. And so that's like a miracle here in Alabama for that to be the case. Right now is when the beetles usually start creating problems.
Mm-hmm.
I have been, and I know a lot of people say, or I don't know if a lot of people, but some people say that the reproductive cycle of the beetles is such that they don't actually consume things once they go in the dirt. They're pretty much there to pupate and then come back out of the ground. But so some people say theoretically Grobex on the ground shouldn't work. But I'm just here to tell you, I've been using it for 2 years. I've been spreading around my colonies pretty consistently every 2-3 months or so. And my beetle numbers are way down. So is that just a coincidence, or is it just a year that's really good this year, or is that Grobex helping?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I'm going to keep spreading it out there.
I'll tell you one person who talks a little bit about it is Kent Williams. They're in Kentucky.
Yeah,
we had him at our club meeting last night. He came in as a special guest, and he didn't specifically talk about that. But when he was in here last year, one of the things he talked about was hive beetles. And of course, in Kentucky, you be in somewhat fertile soil like that, you can actually have pretty good pressures, I'm sure, especially when you kind of move into the middle part of the year. Anyway, he kind of talked about, and I can't remember now what it was. There's an active ingredient that's in the Grobex, and he talked about, you think you can get that active ingredient and kind of make your own concoction.
Was it diatomaceous earth?
No, it's the active ingredient that kills the grubs. And I can't remember the guy's name, but I went to his talk at the Bee Expo. He's with the University of Georgia, and they have been experimenting putting that active ingredient in. Now, this is not the same as some people are buying like insect, like grub type stuff. That's not the same thing as Grobex. It's a different active chemical or active ingredient. And they've been spreading that, and that I think is also effective, but you don't want to put it actually inside your hive. But this stuff that he's talking about, I can't remember, it's a long name, scientific name, but they actually mix it in the pollen patties, and that's where the beetles will typically reproduce. The larvae will be all in that. And what they found is in the studies they've done, it actually, if anything, the bees almost get stronger. It doesn't affect the bees at all. They will still consume the pollen patties, and the grubs can't grow, because when the grubs emerge and hatch, then they die from the stuff that's in the beetles lay their eggs in there, but the grubs can't reproduce. And so, but there's studies being done at the University of Georgia. The guy said he can't recommend it. He can't give you the formula exactly, but I think if you emailed him, he could, but he's not gonna, they can't sell it that way, but you can buy the active ingredient but he also said, don't mix Grobex in your pollen patties, because Grobex is not just that ingredient. It's a lot of other things. And so that he hasn't done any testing with that. There's probably some beekeepers doing that. I don't know, but it's been working pretty good on the ground. Just spreading around. I mean, I think that's got to be helping, because, historically I've had, in Slocum particularly, that's been one of my worst yards. I've just had hive after hive after hive. And then up in Ozark, I had that as well. Had them hive after hive just died out. Even the wintertime up in Ozark, that they destroyed my bee yard up there. But
yeah,
I don't know if it's working. Like I said, I don't know if it's just a better year or not. But I think another couple more things I think that are helping. Number one, the hives are extremely strong. They're stronger than they have been in the past. You can see looking at them, they're just stronger than they usually are this time of year. And hopefully the mites are down, so maybe the bees aren't sick. Maybe the bees are more healthy and can combat the hive beetles better. I don't know. Hive beetles are, Tom, you might agree with this, and Brian, you too, but hive beetles seem to be more drawn to hives that are kind of weak or sick. Even if they look really good, they might be sick, and the beetles can detect that. So if you have a bee yard, in my opinion, let's say you got 10 colonies and one of them is just overrun with beetles, the rest of them aren't, there's probably a pretty good chance that that colony is either sick or on its way out, whether it's because of the beetles or because of other reasons. They're just not, there's something wrong with them. If you've got beetles in every hive, that may not be the case. It just got overrun with beetles. But if they're just in one hive, then I think that that's probably because that hive there's something wrong, even if it's too early to tell by looking at them.
I think when I was going through Saturday and like I checked some of the colonies just like for status. I found one that didn't have a queen, so I moved over like 2 frames of eggs, larvae. I thought, well, let's just let them do their thing over there. But it got to a point that I stopped going through colonies like that just because it was 90 degrees. And I'm like, man, when you're extracting by yourself, 90 degrees, and I was like, 4 or 5 hours in my whole outfit. I think I might have seen, if I saw 5 small hive beetles throughout my whole yard, that's probably adding 1 or 2. I didn't see.
Yeah, that's nothing to worry about. That's nothing to worry about.
Now
Yeah.
I don't normally get some. I mean, like get small hive beetles. Like I've said prior years when you've said you've had slime moths and all that stuff, I joke and I'm like, I got an infestation. I'll see like 5 in a colony, you know. And when you see 5 small hive beetles, it's like, well, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
That's normal. Yeah, I say that's normal, but I mean, maybe we're gonna have a big infestation a week from now. I don't know, but as of this past weekend, man, in Honey Hill Farm though, the thing I noticed, I would pull the so those hives look strong too. I mean, they all are just boiling with bees, all of them. Even those 6 I have out there, they're very strong. One of them is one I replaced, so it's not quite as strong because I put a double nuke into a double 10 frame deep, and they're still building, but they look pretty good. But what I noticed was I've got the migratory lids out there, and when I popped the migratory lids, like the beetles were all between the lip on the back of the hive and on the back they weren't actually, I didn't see a lot of them actually in the hive with the bees.
Yep.
Bees, I think, had driven them out, and they were all hanging out between the lip and the top of the box where it kind of hangs over. And there were like probably hundreds of beetles just all up there. And when you open that up, of course, all the beetles just take off and run everywhere. So you basically destroy a lot of the work the bees have done to hurt them up there.
Yeah.
Mike Berry talks about that a lot, how the bees, they do corral them, and they actually build, it's almost like build little corrals for them. And, they all, if you got a lid, they'll attach that burr comb, and they'll just drive the beetles in there, and they'll all be in there and trapped. And then you open that lid up, and the beetles have freedom to just run everywhere. Yeah. So,
you kind of,
but I tried to smash them if I could. And then I just put my Dixie disposable towels in there. And I also used the new little thing I showed last week. I don't have any now because I put them all in the colonies there. And, but they're little beetle crushers, this little thing that hang on over the top bars of the hives. It's a little tiny lip. And you just it's a new product by Jared. What's his last name? I think is it Markham? Anyway, Ozark Bee. Let me just look right here. Ozark Bee Farm, I think, is the name of his company. But
yeah, I think he's in Missouri, Bruce, because
he is. Yeah,
with the Missouri State Beekeepers organization. And
what's his last? Jared Malcolm is his name.
Yeah, he donated a bunch of those as giveaways to the Missouri State organization, and I actually picked one up, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, so he sent me a box of them, and I put them in. But they're kind of cool. You hang them on the top bars of the frames, and you can go to his website. I think it's Ozark Bee Farm. I believe that's it. I hope that's it. But anyway, I don't have the box sitting here because I used his products this past weekend. But he sent me some, and they sit on the top bars, and the bees can't get under them because it's just a tiny little area. And then you don't push them all the way down. You just kind of leave a little bit of a space on the top. And the bees herd the beetles underneath there, so they're hiding under there. And then when you open your hive the next time, you just push it down and crush them. It's called the Beetle Crusher. And here's another product that he has. I don't know if this is on the website. I don't think he has something he's kind of trying out, but I don't know if you can see that. Those are Roxanne strips. Those are little clips that he designed. And you kind of break your Roxanne strip in half, and you put it up in those clips, and you hang it in. That way the Roxanne strip will hang straight down the middle instead of bowing out and getting into the frame next door. which a lot of people worry about that because the rock sand strips, as you hang them over the frames, they'll tend to bow out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're having a hard time getting, so they tend to bow out like this, and so that frame right there will be pushing on the frame next door,
Mhm.
and the bees will clean out the wax behind, or they won't use that wax.
Yeah.
A lot of people worry. I don't worry too much about it, but a lot of people do. They do the same thing with Apivar strips. They'll have like a space where the strips are.
Yeah.
And with these little clips like this that you can use them for Apivar as well. You just slide the little strip up in there, and then you hang it in the middle, and theoretically they won't tend to push up against one of the frames and clean it out behind it. So it's kind of a cool little thing. It is a little bit time consuming because you have to tear the strips in half and then stick them up in there. It's a little slower than just trying to drape them over the normal application. And so it would have been tough to do, if you put in 900 strips, you'd have to break them apart. That's 1,800 of these clips, if that makes
It's a
sense.
lot.
That would have been a little bit tedious to try and do it on all my colonies. But I did it on several of them, and I'm going to see how they do. And when I break them apart, when I break the hives apart, a little bit later on, I'll just see if the bees are removing the wax underneath those, or if they're hanging down in the middle. If it really helps, I think it will. It's a pretty cool product. If you don't have a whole lot to do, I think it's a good product. Even if you do, if you want to take the time to do it, it's a pretty good little product. But yeah, that's the Beetle Crusher right there. Turn it the other way, Tom, so you can see the end of it. There you go. You just slide over the frame. Those little clamps on the side, they kind of grip to the frame. And so you can kind of push it down as hard as you want. And the idea is you leave just a tiny little crack on the top where the beetles can go under there. Yeah. And then when you go, oh, awesome. And then when you go in the hive the next time, he's going to show you demonstration.
Look at this. Look at how prepared he is.
Yeah, don't push it all the way down, though. I found if you push it all the way down, it'll be flush. So you leave it up just a tiny bit, kind of like that. Just so that make sure the bees can't get under it. But that's it right there. The beetles go hide under there. And then you go in there and you just squish. And there's I don't know why it's kind of, Ozark Bee Barn is the name of it. Is that the name of the company? I think.
Yeah, that's right.
That is right. Ozark Bee Barn. Okay.
Bee
I was just thinking farm, but it's Ozark Bee Barn. But yeah, so you just push it down, and there's something real satisfactory about.
I know.
OzarkBeeBarn.com.
To you guys, but OzarkBeeBarn.com.
Yeah, they are available on the website. I actually looked last week when we were talking, and they are available. The little clips for the strips, I don't think they're on there yet. It might be a prototype. You might be trying those out. I did find, though, I couldn't figure out when I first tried it. I'm like, they don't work because I was trying to push them up in there, and the Varoxan strips are kind of soft. And I couldn't. But then I finally just took it to the top, and I would kind of pinch it up, and it would open the clip up a little bit. I would kind of pull back on the two sides, and then just slide it right up in there, and then hang it in there. So it worked well, but. Anyway, so that's what we did. We just treated. Basically, my main goal this past weekend was getting treated, and every hive has Varoxan strips in there, and so I've got that taken care of. I don't really plan on getting in them much. I'm debating about doing some splits here in the next couple of weeks, so I just don't know. It's just a lot of work, and the hives are set up so good. But I was talking to Cayman today, and I just have had such good success the last couple of years. First of all, using might happen, Brian, one of these days, but just using Zach's queens that seem to take really well down here, and I've gotten a little better at doing the splits, and they, I think the age of the queens matters. If you have this is one of my theories, a theory of Bruce here. So it's kind of like Mike Berry says, it's not a how-to, it's a how I do. And but I think if you can lower the average age of your queens, I just think the bees are more healthy. That's been my experience because I've done a lot of splits. I've got a lot of young queens out there, younger queens. I haven't had great success making my own queens. I've got a few of my own out there, but it's just been hard for me to do that with my time restraints. I've made a few, but it's just if you find a good source for queens, if you make your own really good queens and just keep that average age down, I believe that the bees overall will be healthier. You may have a queen that lasts you 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
But when she starts to crash and when she starts to go down, she's not going to be as good as when she was, 1 or 1.5, 2 years old. And so I don't replace all my queens every year. I just can't do that. But I do, as I make splits, they obviously have younger queens in there. And so overall, if I make more splits, the average overall age of queens, and then I know some swarm every year and replace their own queens, but that's kind of a theory I have. But they do need to be good quality queens as well. And I've had just tremendous success with Zach's queens. I just have to be honest about it. They've really been a game changer for my operation. I was talking to Cayman today about that. You know, I'm not sure what Zach's done with his genetics, but they are Italian, Cordovan, I think, primarily. And I think historically, and Zach is in the chat here, he was a while ago. I know Cordovans tend to just build brood a lot. They may not make as much honey. And Italians, I think, can be hit or miss sometimes. But whatever strain he has developed, they do a lot of brood. They brood a lot. Like, they never stop brooding in the wintertime here in Alabama. There's a little bit of brooding in them all the time, at least. But they don't just do brood. When the honey kicks in, they start filling the supers up with honey, and they explode up, and they just are very productive bees. And they do have to be treated for mites. They're not necessarily designed to be, you know, mite free. They're not VSH genetics or anything like that. At least the ones I have, they get some mites in them. But if you treat them and take care of them, man, they will treat you right. So yeah, I'm real pleased with them, and it's been a lot of fun. They're also much more gentle than my historic bees have been.
Nice.
Anyway, I just spent like 20 minutes going through that. So we'll listen to somebody else now.
Hey, Bruce, I want to comment to what you were talking about earlier with the hive beetles pressure and weaker colonies and such. So I'll tell you my observation. So the last, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 years, we've been doing a significant amount of cutouts in around the St. Louis area. And I'm going to say maybe significant for us, I would say. Maybe 30, 35 cutouts in a season. And I would always take those cutouts back to a quarantine yard. I never put them in without the rest of our bees, you know, just in case you get illness. Anything can happen. The virus loads are high. Maybe you've got high beetle pressure, whatever that might look like. The one thing that I've noticed as general observation, kind of backing up what you were saying a minute ago, I can actually remove a colony that looks really healthy. Everything looks right. There's no problems. And there'll barely be any hive beetles in the colony that I vacuum up. Well, when I used to actually frame up some of the brood comb and a little bit of honey, that tends to really disrupt a lot of things. When you bring it back and you introduce the bees inside there, so I could start with almost no hive beetles inside that colony. But within, I usually dump all the bees on top of the box. If I cage the queen, I'll usually leave the queen cage for a couple of days, maybe put a frame of honey in there. If I didn't keep any of the brood and frame it up, I would notice a few days later, I would go from virtually no hive beetles, and within a couple of days, the hive beetle pressure would skyrocket. Now, I know for a fact that I didn't vacuum the hive beetles in there. They weren't there at that time. So I'm thinking about it. What has actually changed with that hive that was really cohesive and everything looked right? You know, the brood pattern looked beautiful. There wasn't any illness that I noticed in there, or at least the viral loads weren't to a point that they were noticeable. The one thing that changed, I think, was the stress on the colony. And I believe that hive beetles smell stress within a colony. So stress can look like a lot of different things. It can be a lack of food, whether it's protein source, whether it's nectar source. It can look like when you're cutting the brood frames open and you're stressing out the larvae, because the larvae, I think, put off a stress pheromone if they're not getting fed properly. So, and again, cutting those brood frames and putting them in there, I think that would most definitely cause stress within a colony. So I do believe that it's stress within the colony that actually the hive beetles are attracted to. The area in which we would keep these cutouts was kind of up behind our shop area where I keep my landscaping equipment at. And in those areas, of course, being I'm a landscaper, we have a lot of mulches up there. We have a lot of fertile soils and really good stuff. Well, the hive beetles can pupate in that very nicely. And it is a little bit shaded where I keep them too. So I actually started keeping less of the cutouts there. But the other thing that I tried to do differently was I very seldom frame up any of the brood comb. And I feel like that's actually helped quite a bit with the pressures of the hive beetles. So again, is there a specific correlation? I don't know. It's just a general observation that I've noticed and something that seemed to make sense to me. So maybe I'm completely off course here.
I tend to agree. I think I may be wrong. If anyone has watched or anyone knows better, let me know. But I think Randy, Dirt Rooster, I don't think he frames his comb up anymore. I don't know that. I don't think Yappy does either. I could be wrong on that. I think they just pretty much put it in. I think
I
they just
actually
pretty,
asked him about that one time, and that's what he said. Earlier on, he would frame it up, but
yeah,
then
yeah.
he stopped doing that because of that specific reason. So
Mhm.
that was his thought process too, and it kind of made sense when he said it.
Well, if you take the bees and you dump them on either a drawn comb or you dump them on even foundation that's well waxed, then you feed them.
Mhm.
Or if you put them in there even during a flow. And I mean, those bees, it's almost like they've swarmed in and they can just kind of start over more easily than trying to repair and fix
I
and
agree.
just figure everything out in an entirely different configuration. When they're in a wall or in a ceiling or in a floor, and you cut out little sections and you put them with rubber bands into a frame, it's an entirely different configuration than what they were. So they've got
Oh,
to figure all
absolutely.
that out, repair it all, and kind of rework their entire hive. This is once again theory of Bruce talking here. However, if you just put the bees into a empty foundation or into an empty hive and let them start over,
Mhm.
they can just rebuild that in the way they need to be able to be most efficient. And
Absolutely.
obviously they're stressed, but then they can just go to work and not have to worry about trying to fix everything and pull all the dead larvae out and fight off pests that are trying to come in. That they can just start from scratch. And if you ever, obviously you have seen this, but anyone who's ever done a cutout, it's got a lot of honey. Honey is dripping everywhere, and it's just messy. I mean, you try
It's
to
a
be,
pain.
but it's even if you try to be clean, it's just messy. It's just honey everywhere, even on some of that comb. And so
Yeah.
I think it. Well, I think Randy may have been the one that told me. But either him or Yappy, one of those two told me they just stopped putting it on comb. I think maybe both of them do that now, and it absolutely. They both say it works a lot better that way. Just
Yeah,
let the hive
definitely.
bees start from
Well, and
scratch, and
it's a perfect time too, much like you would with the package. It's a perfect time to hit them with oxalic acid. If you get them in
sure,
there, I'll give them maybe a couple drawn frames, maybe a frame of honey to kind of hold them over. Put feed to
mm,
them, a real light feed, keep them stimulated, and let them start building. And once the queen starts laying in there, but before they've capped it, I'll hit them with a couple rounds of oxalic acid. I mean, it's a
sure.
cheap treatment. And it's very effective. It's shown that, and it doesn't hang out in the comb. It's virtually undetectable within hours. So kind of
Yeah.
it's a good treatment, so.
Yeah, Jason suggested you can put a frame of a brood from one of your other hives in there if you want to kind of give them a head
Sure.
start. That's an idea as well. I've actually found that to lock, if you want to lock a swarm in, catch a swarm in the springtime that you want to keep around. If you want to lock them in, lots of times you drop a frame of brood in there,
Mhm.
and they typically won't leave if you do that. I've never had them leave. I don't think when I did that. You mentioned earlier, Tom. I'm kind of jumping back to an earlier topic you were talking about that you have like a quarantine yard for your cutouts.
That's right.
I actually did that this year with my swarms, and I'm glad I did. Most of them are doing well as far as health of the hives go. They're looking good. However, one of them has turned into a devil hive.
Uh-oh.
Just mean. This is how I used to get all my genetics, was mostly from swarms, or local bees, or just and so forth. And so, I mean, we just recently had a case, and Richard Prager, who's been in the chat here, he was the one that found him. He was doing a cutout up in Eufaula, I think just kind of right across the river, or across the lake from Georgia. And he had done a cutout. I think he told me, I actually called him. I didn't know it was him, but when I heard where the location was of this happening, I called him and asked if it was him. But in the news reports, they said they found Africanized bees in up near Eufaula. And so I asked, was that you? And he said it was. And so he sent me some footage of it. And he basically he had already done a cutout in that house. I'm not sure if it was the same day or if it was another earlier, whenever it was, but he was up on a lift, probably 10, 12 feet up up on the side of an old house, looks like an old wooden house. And he opened that panel up, and they just absolutely got after him. And he was telling me that I think there was like a dog like 50 yards away or something. They started attacking, and they followed him. They chased him. And so he euthanized the bees. He had to, but he did keep the queen, and he got a sample of the bees and got the queen. She obviously was dead as well. Sent him off to Auburn. I think it was Auburn, but sent him off to a lab to be tested, and they were Africanized. I think he said 40%. Queen was 40% Africanized, and so I just, so that makes me a little bit leery. I catch a swarm. And now they've developed into this devil bees, and they were just really, really bad. They haven't been that bad, but now the hive is getting big and strong. I think they even pulled a super of honey off of them, maybe. But they just, when I went to do treatments the other day, they were just absolutely off the chain. Just that high, shrill, what I hate. And so I'm thinking about me getting them tested to see. I don't think they're Africanized really, but it never hurts to get them tested. We've had now, up until last year, there have never been a case, I don't think, reported in Alabama of Africanized bees. And last year, there were some up in northern Alabama a little bit. And now we've got this case. And so I guess we can't be in that category anymore. But I think that also is a lesson for all of us if we're going to do a cutout to, I think when you cut a wall open, make sure you have the gear on to start off with. And then maybe if they're general, you could take it off. But I would just be real hesitant, especially if you're in a state or an area where they've had issues with that. I would be hesitant just to cut into some random wall. I would. Now, the pros, some of them may not agree with me, but I think that Richard was glad that he had his outfit on when they got after him like they did, because they absolutely came after him. I'm going to try to find that video if I can of him.
I don't think just for Ohio, we're too cold. If anything would migrate up here, somebody would bring one of those colonies up here. I don't think they would last the winter. They're not like the traditional colonies where they're going to go out and forage and pack it in. They're going to rob stuff out and move on, rob stuff out, move on, and they don't pack it in. So they don't survive up here. So probably one of the benefits of living in Ohio.
Yeah.
I get turned around when I try to. I'm going to put it by the mic here so if you can hear it. Let me see if I can do this. Isn't that crazy?
Oh my gosh. They're on him.
I don't think that video is doing justice,
They were just crazy. And then here's another one. That was crazy.
Yeah, I don't think the microphone's picking it up well.
Yeah.
You can see the activity right around him. It seems aggressive.
But it was nuts. He said they just were chasing him. Like normally bees, even mean ones, once you get a few yards away, they'll kind of start to back off. But they chased him. He said like 75 yards away. He just walked away to see, and they were just chasing him. And so, just be careful out there is what I would say.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. My next moves I'm going to make over in my yard. I am going to make sure that I wear everything, and I me with my shorts, I was thinking about shorts on Saturday just because it was 90 degrees. And I thought, man, I'm going to be over there extracting, and I don't have fume boards. I forgot to pick them up last time I was down at Greg's, and I was going to order them, and they wouldn't have been here in time. So I'm like, why am I even going to waste the money to order them if they're not going to be here in time?
Sure.
So I did it my old-fashioned way, where I literally shake each frame. And when you're going through boxes, shaking all those bees up, I just knew ahead of time, let me wear jeans,
sure.
And I've got a set of boots now. I had like 2 or 3 pair of hunting boots, and I thought, let me just take a set of boots over there. That way they're there. I'm more protected, because that's usually where the bees get me, are on my ankles. For some odd reason, just always.
Those are so painful too.
But I mean, part of the reason though, Tom, is I wear shorts, and they tag me on my socks.
Yeah.
Now, I would say 95% of my socks, they're all black ankle socks.
Makes sense.
And they always tag me on my socks on my ankles. And I just thought, with it being 90 and I'm going to be doing all that, let me bring the boots. And for everything I did now, I had some worked up bees, but it's just what I was doing. I'm tearing hives apart, doing all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't take a single sting.
Yeah, it's
so.
Yeah, if you're pulling honey, I think it's smart.
The gear I had on, it worked fantastic. So
I mean, I do believe that you can work bees, and all, if your bees are gentle, it's okay. Some people can work them, but I just think it's always good to be prepared. This past weekend, my bees were crazy. They weren't crazy like they've been in the past, but we were ripping them apart. They haven't been ripped apart in, like I say, like 3 months probably since late March, which says April, May, June, all that over 3 months. And Grammy. And so I don't blame them. I don't blame them for being a little bit feisty and upset when you jam your hive tool in the corner and just try and break them apart. You have to pry the box up and go frame by frame and release the frames and then try to kind of twist it off. And it's just, I don't blame them for being a little bit mean. But had we tried to go do them in shorts that day, not that I ever do, but even just a veil without a jacket and gloves on, it would have been, it would have been pretty bad. So it's just smart to, some people, it's almost like a badge of honor when they're like, I don't, my bees, I don't have to wear a jacket, or I know what I'm doing. I don't have to wear a jacket. And hey, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's not me. I'm pretty much going to have some kind of protect, even if they're real gentle, even in the springtime when everything's happy, the bees are buzzing, the birds are chirping and everybody's happy and it's perfect, 70-degree weather, got flowers blooming everywhere. Even then I'll wear a veil, even if they're just super gentle and I don't have to really I just wear a veil because I'm more comfortable.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I think I'm a bad beekeeper because I'm wearing a veil. It's just I'm more comfortable that way. Oh, here's another thing. Yeah, Scott says make sure to zipper your pants up. That's for sure. And I took one. Yeah, I took one when we were harvesting. Those guys were here, and I had my jacket, and I flipped my veil over my neck, and I didn't zip it around here. I forgot to do that, and one got it in my veil and got me right between the eyes. And then the other day, same thing happened. I was I think it was Thursday. I just got a drink or something, or I was going between bee yards, had my thing over my head, flipped it back over, working bees, and they were really worked up. And one got up in my veil and got me right on the septum of the nose, just right here. And my eyes watered for a while. And that hurt. That was painful.
Ouch.
It didn't really swell much at all. I don't usually swell much at all, but man, my eyes were just,
yeah.
And then what do? You got 2 or 3 bees in your veil with you, but you got bees flying around you because you're ripping boxes apart. I just zipped it up, and the rest of them just kind of walked around on my face and head, and they didn't sting me. But that one got me right in the septum of the nose, so that was just wonderful.
That's sensitive spot right there.
Yeah, it is so sensitive.
You know what? Hazards of the trade.
Oh, I just love it though.
Yeah.
One of the last ones I got was like right around the nostril.
Oh, ouch! Yeah. Yeah. Same as the septum.
It hurt. And I did the same thing. I didn't have that's funny. Nothing like a sting on the rear.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I did the same thing. I didn't have my zippers all the way. And I learned because there was one that got up and was just kind of buzzing around, and then another one, and I thought, man, I had to have forgotten something because 2 aren't going to get up there. And this has been like 2-3 weeks ago. And next thing I knew, one was right on my nose, and she planted, and I was like, dang it. That hurts. That's so sensitive.
All around that nose, yeah.
Oh,
I've discovered a new, and most people I'm just maybe late to the party, but they're called 511 or 511 tactical pants or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
And my buddy Tyler down there recommended them. He's the commercial beekeeper, and I've normally just wore jeans, and my jeans, I had a couple weeks in a row or a couple times in a row where I squatted down and they ripped in the crotch. I'm like, well, these jeans are done. They were really old. So I said, well, I'm just gonna get me some new pants. So he told me what they were, and I ordered a pair. Those things are so lightweight. They're so comfortable and they're cool, and bees just don't sting through them. Unless, of course, you do like I did last Thursday as well, when I'm trying to do it by myself and I'm out there with these deep boxes that have bees bearding all over them. Yeah, that's right, 511. That's right, Highland honey. Everybody else seems to know about these pants, but I just found out about them, started wearing them. But if you pick up a deep box of honey, or any box of honey for that matter, that's got bees all over it, and then you lean them up against your pants, they're gonna, sting through it, even no matter what they are. But they really, I've taken very, very few stings to those pants. I would usually get a few through my jeans if the bees are upset, but they don't tend to sting through them. They don't seem to even be on them, really. They don't really attack them. So, but now Tyler did tell me not to get the brown ones or the gray ones. He said, be sure you get the tan ones, the khaki ones. He said for some reason they just don't they don't care for the darker color ones, so they will get after you a little bit with those. But
So that's
I've discovered a new thing with those pants. I just love them. They're so comfortable. And the other thing that I've started using this Foxhound Sting Stopper jacket. And the previous jacket I wore was a pullover, and it wouldn't go down. My torso is kind of long, and so the plumber's crack was prime target there. The plumber's crack right there, it didn't go down far enough. And so if I bend over, they get me, and they wouldn't always sting me there, but they would get up, and all of a sudden I'd have bees in my veil, and I think they would climb up my back and get up in my veil. And with this newer jacket, I haven't had that problem as much because it's longer, and it fits me a little bit better. So
you have to remember, bees go up, sweat goes down. So if you feel something going down, it's not a problem. You feel something going up, that's a red flag.
That's for sure. Yeah, that's sure. Yeah, DC says Foxhound is good.
It's not the 511, but it's called True Work. I think it's TRU.
I've seen those advertised. Yeah,
it's very similar to the 511, where it's like a moisture wicking material, so they dry very quickly. And there's different levels, like a 1, 2, and 3, and it's the thickness of each one. Now I have 4 pair that I use as like work pants, and I'm saying 95% of the time when I'm in a bee yard, I just have pants on. It's just, I don't get sticky on me. I don't have to worry about the bees, going.
Yeah, they work well, and they dry. Like they don't stay. Like they seem to, if they're all sweaty and nasty, like what you go. I mean, within a few minutes, it seems that they dry out pretty quick. So anyway.
Yeah, this time of year, I was sweating through those things like mad. And honestly, today, I have 2 pair that are gray, 1 pair that's black, and then 1 pair that's green. And honestly, I don't notice an issue with it. I almost never get stung below the waist. Now, I will tell you that, like you said, Bruce, I have a long torso as well. And sometimes if I'm reaching up and my jacket pulls up a little bit, those girls, especially if I'm all sweaty and my shirt is stuck to me from sweat, they'll find my love handle every time. And I'll tell you, you wouldn't think that's a sensitive area.
Oh,
but
it is.
I actually wince on that one. It's like getting stung in the nose. It's they were stinging me in the wrist today, but it wasn't a problem. My eyes are absolutely I had so much sweat in my eyes today. It's ridiculous. They are still burning me, which honestly, the bee stings were the least of my concern. The sweat.
Tom, when you've got the extra padding on your body, like some people here, when the bee stings you, you just look and you're like, well, you're stupid. You didn't even get to the nerves on that one.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, certain areas like the nose, and I would say the love handles, but the ankles, to me, if they get you right on the like right around the I don't know what the malleolus. I'm not sure what do you call that, Brian. The bump on your ankle on both sides, right below that. I would call anyway, the lower right there on the ankle.
The ankle bone.
Ankle bone on the inside and the outside. But if they get you right around the bottom of that bone, it's super, super sensitive. And
hurts.
I got the devil bees, another hive of devil bees that aren't my bees, but they're rough, and they drop right down to your ankles. And they got me one day, and I almost couldn't walk that night. It was just, and I'm pretty tough. Like stings don't bother me. They get me in the wrist. I get 30 stings on my wrist in the day, and my wrist just swells up a little bit. That really doesn't hurt, but man, they get me around my ankles. Ooh, that hurts. Anyway, everybody probably has their own spots. They're a little more sensitive, but boy, yeah. Grammy says, the
inner thighs.
Yeah. What about? I tell you, another place is on the lobe of the ear. That hurts too. But anyway.
Yeah, Melissa.
I'm sure we all have stories
on the inner thighs too. I never get stung below the waist. It's weird, but I don't know. It is what it is. And Melissa said this could be a height thing. She's a little bit more kind of at that height, being a little bit more vertically challenged than I am. But I guess it is what. Oh my gosh!
He was trying to think of the right. He was trying to think of the right way to say that.
I just got a shoe thrown at me.
I just had to look over for the delay. That way I could see that. That is hilarious.
Gosh. Well, at least we have it on video when I call the police here, huh? Little spousal abuse. Gosh,
that is hilarious.
I mean, geez, she's a little caliente this evening.
See?
I guess we all have our spots that, tend to be a little more sensitive than others, but it's interesting how we kind of talk about that, and everybody's got, when I get stung here, it really gets a hold of me, so Melissa has a story that would be a fun one to tell. We were over at JW Irwin's place earlier this spring and going through some of his colonies. And I want to say it was back in the very first part of April, if I remember right, maybe the first week. And anyway, JW always claims how he barely wears a veil and anything. And if he's in here, he'll finally now comment to this, I'm sure, because I'll get him fired up a little bit. Talks about how he barely wears a veil and how his bees are so nice. Well, when we go in there and start moving boxes, you know, we don't crush bees, but we try to move very quickly and efficiently, trying to get, because we had 40 something hives to get through that day while we were out there. And so we're moving pretty quickly, and that can, you know, take bees to a different level. You know, much like you said, Bruce, when you're pulling honey supers and you're moving fast, that can get bees a little bit wound up. Anyway, somehow he kept, basically, Melissa and I were going through and managing the colonies. We find the queen, we mark the queens for them, and we set everything up. We're kind of setting up for honey production because we pull everything down to 4 frames of brood and pull the excess off. Anyway, he has this hoop building on the other side of some of his hives. Well, he kept taking off his veil, He kept doing it. And he got stung 3 or 4 times, and he'd carry on a little bit about it, which was funny. And I'm like, I thought your bees didn't sting you. And I'm like, I hear you over there hollering like a girl. What's the deal? Anyway, he had his veil off one time, and a bee climbed down his ear canal. And I hear him hollering on the other side of the hoop building, and I hear Melissa on the other side just frantically laughing at him. And I'm like, would you two knock it off? We're trying to get work done, and you guys are there lollygagging around, and I hear, the bee's in my ear. It's in my ear. And Melissa's like, hold still. So I can't see this. I just hear this through the hoop building. It was one of these situations where you really had to be there. But I'll tell you what, if you can visualize it in your head, an 81-year-old man saying, the bees in my ear, Melissa's laughing at him and just carrying on, and he's getting more frustrated with it. But it was a good time.
I bet I know how she took care of the bee.
She got in there and dug it out.
Well, she probably took her shoe off and chucked it at him.
She probably did. And that's probably why he was yelling. It wasn't the bee. It was her smacking him on the side of the head with the shoe, you know?
Yeah, Michael talks about how he got in the chat here, how he got stung in the canal one time. I'll tell you, when I had hives in my backyard here one day, I was, you know, they crawl around my face. I just let them. I used to like walk away and get them out of my veil, but now I just don't worry about it. Like, they're trying to get out of the veil. Usually they're trying to get away from me. So normally if they crawl around my face, they get off. Usually they don't sting me. Every once in a while they will. But one day I was back here in my backyard. I just had my veil on, a little veil thing I wear sometimes. And one got in that veil. I felt it crawling around my ear. I think it was my left ear, just like what you're talking about, Tom. And that thing, I felt it right on the canal of my ear. And then it just started going down in my ear. And the weirdest thing about it was, as that bee got deeper in, it started buzzing. And if you can't remember, JW will probably tell this is probably what's going on to him. You hear it buzzing and it freaks you out because it's so close to your brain. It's just like, zzz, zzz, and it's right there. It's getting deeper and deeper. It's like it's drilling down into your ear.
Yeah.
And I have visions of this bee getting stuck in my ear, like behind my eardrum. And it freaked me out. And I was just like, I stopped everything I was doing. I started walking up towards the house. I'm like tapping the side of my head, tap, tap. It was on this side over here, actually tap, 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 trying to get it to back out. And the more I tapped on it, the more freaked out I got, the more freaked out the bee got. And it just got more and more shrill. And finally, I can't remember what I did. I did something and the bee started to back out. And when it did, it stung me right on not in the canal, but kind of right as it was coming out of the ear. And the sting wasn't the worst. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't down in the canal like what Michael's was, but man, that is a freaky feeling when that thing is, because it's scared and it's getting more and more panicked and buzzing louder and louder, more and more shrill. And oh my gosh, that is a freaky feeling. And I was glad it didn't get stuck down. I'm glad it didn't sting my eardrum. That would have been real painful, I'm sure. But it didn't. It backed out finally, and we got it out of there.
You know, it's funny how if you're a newer beekeeper and you're a little bit more concerned about the bees getting around you, just the sound of bees being aggressive or the tone change can kind of get you a little bit stressed out, you know? So the one thing that I'll do occasionally if I'm out in the bee area by myself, I'll put in some earbuds and I'll turn on music so I don't hear a thing. You know, if the bees are hitting my bill, you can see it, you know, but
that's smart.
Generally we don't have colonies that are quite that aggressive, but you just don't hear it. So I mean, if you were concerned about it, your stress level would probably be a little bit lower. You know what I mean? So,
I will tell you this. It was interesting when Greg came down here and worked my bees. You know, first of all, he was here back about 3 years ago, I think, in July, and my bees were really bad that day. It was late July. He brought some queens. We were trying to make splits and put queens in. The bees were my mean bees. They were awful. off the chain. They really showed up and showed out for him that day. He could see when I'm, he had, I think he was, man, I could work him without gloves. And so I think he counted, he had like 86 stings in his 2 hands after we went through a few hives and finally put gloves on. They were just ridiculous. And so he came back February 1st, I think we were working bees, and he was complimentary on how much nicer my bees were. It was a really pretty day, and we went through a lot of colonies, but we were really in tune because most of them were just real gentle. And it's so much more pleasant to work when they're gentle. There's just like a constant little hum going on, and they're just so gentle. They don't care about you. You can work with them. And we noticed a couple of hives. I think we found about 3 or 4 different levels of aggressiveness. The real gentle ones, and the next level up was they kind of started flying around a little bit agitated. It was kind of a little bit more loud. And then you have the bee, but they're really not aggressive. They're just kind of flying around. They're a little more flighty. Mm-hmm. The next level was, they're pretty shrill. Like you can hear them flying around pretty aggressively, but they're just bumping you. They're not really trying to attack you at all. And that's, I think, the highest level we got to that day. And there were a couple of colonies that were but when that happens, the stress level, it's like you said, Tom, it's like there's a stress level. Even if you're used to working bees, if you're in tune with them, like it'll wear you out. Like it just, because I don't know if it's just the intensity, the flight or flight, even if you're not feeling upset or nervous, it's just the whole thing just gets stimulation. And that's kind of what happened to my son-in-law, I think. And the guy that helped me the other day when we were doing that, it's just like, it was such high stimulation. He did get stung some, and it was hard work, but man, it was just the bees were flying around. And then there's, of course, the 4th level, which is, they're actively trying to sting. And I don't think we really had any of that day when Greg was here that were actually actively trying to sting us and get after us. I guess the 5th level will be the Africanized. But there is definitely maybe that's why bees are so good for people that have PTSD and stuff, is because there is a relationship there, and it does affect your emotions and your feelings. And you can definitely tell the days when you work them and they're super calm, it's just almost relaxing to you. Mm-hmm. But the days you work them and they're a little bit more feisty and they're a little more in the air flying around and just there's more stimulus going on. Mm-hmm. I think you feel a little more exhausted. That's something that I've noticed anyway.
Mm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure.
But if you put earphones on and you don't hear them, then it's cool. You don't have that issue.
You can see them, but it just you just keep moving. You're singing along to the music, doing your thing, and
that's not a bad idea.
Stuck up on me at any point in time as I'm moving along, but it just helps pass the day. You get some good tunes going, and just get in the bees and start working.
Yeah, Glade says Glade came and helped me harvest. I don't know if you see that, Brian, up there, but he said he didn't think my bees were too bad. They're not. I mean, they've been so much better. They're actually quite calm. Yeah,
that's what I'm waiting for when I come down.
They're much more calm. But the other day, even the most gentle bees would have been a little agitated the other day. That we were just having to go through them really quick, and they had everything glued down. And I don't care how nice your bees are, they're going to get irritated with what we were doing. But Grammy says, Glade, ask about Bruce's old Ozark yard and the flower hive. Yeah, Lisa came up there a couple times when the bees ran around the yard, and that there was a hive that's painted with a flower on it, like I bought from somebody else, the box. And it was the one that, it was not Lisa's friend at all. Lisa came up there though, and in defense of the bees, she wore like these, I don't know what, it was like skin tight, like pants. And so they were just stinging right through them, but it was kind of crazy. But then now the flower hive is at Apple Farms, and those bees are super nice, Lisa. So the attitude has changed. I've got a different queen in there, and very productive and gentle bees. And so the flower hive is doing much better now.
That's good.
Anyway, that was kind of a fun topic. I don't know if we've ever really talked about that before. Of all 3 years of a StreamTeam, I'm not sure if we've talked about being stung that much before.
Yeah.
No.
I was thinking back, Bruce, what you were just telling the story about your son-in-law and getting stung, and it helped his wrist. I'm feeling like, since that happened, you may have gotten yourself some help for life, I mean, if you had just a complete negative experience, even though being a tough guy, maybe it wouldn't have happened again, but the fact that the bee actually helped him out, with a little bit of pain management, might actually prove that he'll, if he starts having an issue again, he'll be like, hey, happy to come over and help,
Yeah, I think he wants to help. I think he wants to learn, but it's just different when get started in bees and you go through 2 or 3 hives or even 8 or 10 hives. But when you go to a guy that's got 75, what was it, 45, 70, 75 colonies to go through, and they're all super packed out, and it's July and it's hot and humid, and you're doing what we did. That's a tough introduction. That's a tough introduction to bees.
Oh yeah.
I had a kid one time. He actually a friend of mine, close friend of mine. He's a scout leader here, Boy Scouts, and the kid he was like a really good. He's a scouting kid, and he was at scout camp, and my friend runs in scout camp, and so this kid had wanted to come and do bees, and so he and his dad showed up. We were harvesting honey that day, and I think it was a little cloudy, and he said, Bruce, this kid is interested in bees. Can he come and help you harvest honey? And I said, now you understand that, I mean, harvesting honey right now, this time of year, I think it was the summer harvest. I'm not sure, but the bees were not happy. It was why I didn't have my bees were still a little bit on the mean side. And it was, I think, a little cloudy that day. And we were pulling honey, and that poor kid, I mean, it was just overstimulation. I mean, he hung in there and tried, but it was just too much. Really, if you need to, I think it's best if you're just getting introduced to bees to just start off with just going through a few, just with the idea of going and looking at the bees, not trying to go in there and just do some kind of a big job. Not trying to really break the hives apart and go through a bunch of colonies. It's best to just learn a little bit at a time. But my son-in-law, he's a tough, good, hard worker. He's a good kid, and he's pretty tough. And so he had to walk away a few times and maybe had a few choice words here or there, but I probably did too that day, because we were, but he had to just kind of walk away and collect himself and come back. And thank goodness he was there, because he did a lot of the heavy lifting. I can do it, but he is just younger and stronger than I am right now. So it was nice to have him there.
Absolutely.
The other guy, it was nice to have him, because he could put Thomas was able to put the strips in on the top boxes and kind of get the lid and get them started. And so it really went. We moved pretty quick, but it was just a lot to go through on a very hot day.
Yeah.
Talking about like new people and around bees, there's somebody that I met through one of the local clubs. Their vice president had reached out, and just because she knew that I was connected with Greg and that, and the club had a gentleman reach out, and he wanted to get started with bees. So I got them all hooked up. We got them 2 nukes from Greg, and I went out. It's probably been a week and a half or so ago now, and we went through and just did an inspection, and we added on the second box and that. But when I was holding the frames, I told him, I said, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to talk you through everything. And like, that's a good scenario, 2 brand new colonies. It's a good scenario for somebody just to start learning. And I saw a frame that had a real nice, like that band of honey on the top of it. And it was all like that white wax on it. So it's all fresh, And I told him, I said, all right, Mike, I said, give me the frame. So I grabbed the frame and I said, take one of your gloves off. He said, what? I said, take your glove off. I said, they ain't going to sting you. I was holding the frame with no gloves. I said, they ain't going to sting you. I said, look at me. He said, yeah, but you've been doing this. I said, what's the difference? I said, if you use the same movements like you've been, they're not going to sting you. And the best thing that I seen him do, he said, well, what am I going to do now? I said, stick your finger in the honey. He was hooked. You should have seen his face. His first little bite of his honey.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh my God. Seeing like a new beekeeper, just the look on his face and that, oh man, it was priceless. Priceless.
Getting the raw honey straight out of the hive, nothing better than that.
No, there's not.
Yeah, it was
sure
good.
Isn't.
It was good. I don't know what is up. My camera that I normally use is not working. And now I think my little, I don't even know what you want to call it, the little adapter is conking out, because now my microphone, it's not even detecting my mic. So
we hear you really good. It sounds like your mic's on.
Yeah.
It's
not echoing. It doesn't sound like a MacBook mic. It sounds like it's your regular. I mean, it just sounds clear and crisp. It doesn't sound echoey at all. Not like mine does when I use my computer one.
It's on my MacBook.
It sounds great.
Well, all right.
Yeah.
Wow. So what, Tom, I saw you're saying you're going to be extracting in another week?
Yeah, about a week and a half. So not this week, but my plan is to start probably. I'm actually not going to plan any landscaping work for my sons next week on Friday. So my plan would be to pull Friday, Saturday, and if it can all work out well, I can get it all done then. But I may have to go into a third day to pull. In the past, what we have done, and it kind of depends on what's happening with the robbing pressure. So if there's a lot of pressure, we'll try to get them blown out. Because we use a fume board as well. Come back and start flipping a bunch of lids off. Fume board, and we set out anywhere between 6 and 8 fume boards. And by the time you get those set out, you can come back to the first one, flip it up, pull a super, stand it up on the end, and then a guy we have a couple Milwaukee battery powered blowers, and we just start blowing them out aggressively. And
Okay.
interestingly enough, people think that is very aggressive and hard on the bees, and I would argue that actually it's much easier on the bees than those silly brushes that you get with your beginner kits. You can pretty much, in my opinion, take the little brushes that you get with the beginner kits and throw them away. Because if you want to make bees mad, hit them with that brush. It rolls them across the frame, and it agitates them very much so. So anyway, we flip it up, blow them all out, and then another guy grabs it, throws it onto the flatbed, either the flatbed truck or the flatbed trailer. And then it's still kind of working as assembly line. So it'll be myself, my 2 boys, and then Melissa. Typically, we'll do the blowing out and the moving. The boys go load the trailer, and then kind of much like what you might have been doing, Bruce. And then in the past, as long as the robbing pressure is not heavy or high, she'll start doing mite washes. We'll keep a few of those mite wash cups, and we'll start mite washing colonies through there, and then writing the mite numbers down in the lids. We've even gone as far as, not last year, but the year before, we actually put treatments on the hives right then and there, threw an empty box of foundation on top of them and closed them up, and then moved on. So we actually were able to pull honey. We were actually able to do a mite check, write it on the lids, and then also put the treatments on, which it's a lot going on at one time. So they're all discombobulated, and then they all kind of start to get a little bit. We're generally using Apigard as a treatment, so that sometimes can keep them pushed out of hive a little bit, depending on our temperatures and such. But honestly, that's kind of been our MO and kind of how we've operated, and it works well. I don't know if we'll get to do all the checks and stuff and the treatments then, but I usually, as soon as I pull honey, it's eating at me. I'm like, I need to check the colonies for what the mite pressures are, so we can get an idea of where they're at. And I need to get the treatments on the hive because I want to get them cleaned up as quickly as I possibly can and get them healthy. That way we're being set up then for when we get into, later part of August and September, when we start getting a little bit of flows and some more pollen starts to trickle back in. I know that's like my last ability to get some of those winter bees built. So I want them to be as healthy as I possibly can. So, even when we're extracting honey, if I don't get that done right there, it just eats at me. I'm like, I got to get this. Melissa's like, just settle down. And I'm like, we need to get these colonies treated. I'm like, I have an idea in my head and a timeline and a goal. So, sometimes the temperatures don't allow us to do that. Most of the time they do, so we'll see. I'm actually going to try something a little bit different with my regiment this year. We've always used Apigard, and we've also used oxalic acid. I think what my plan is, I ordered up, I think it was 60 pads of the Formic Pro, and I'm going to use that. So I was telling you that Kent Williams was at our meeting yesterday, and we were talking to him. I took him out to dinner first, and we chatted for about an hour and a half. And we were talking a little bit about his regiment. And the one thing that he said that he does, and I thought was a really good idea, he only uses one Formic Pro pad, and he doesn't do it over 90 degrees. What he'll do then is, he said, most of the time, any of your acids, and well, I guess thymol does the same thing, will actually cause a queen to pause. She'll stop laying for a short period of time. So what he does is when he puts that pad on, he pulls it off. I thought he said within 10 days. He goes, you count out from the time you put the pad on 24 days or 25. He goes, then what you do, there's an overlap when she stopped laying, the rest of your brood has now emerged from the capping. So you got a few day window in there that you can shoot oxalic acid in there. So basically what he's doing is he's causing a brood break with the Formic Pro, you know, kind of catching a lot of them there, but maybe he's cleaning up any of the stragglers at that few day window where the queen has started laying again, but everything else has emerged. So there's very few cappings in there at that point. So at that point, he's cleaning up at probably a 98%, efficacy, or kill rate. So I thought it was a good idea. So I ordered a bunch of Formic Pro, and I'm going to do it as just on probably 1 yard. I'm going to try it and see how it works out for me.
Yeah, I tried the Formic a couple of times, and I just used 2 pads. But what I found was it does stop the queen. A lot of the queens will stop laying.
Yeah,
and it was interesting because some of the colonies where it was like a little bit of a spotty brood pattern, like it would just shut her down for a few days, and then she would come back laying like with a perfect brood pattern or a perfect egg. It was just interesting how that happened. But I did have Tom from not apiaries, I think that's called. Anyway, they're the creators of Formic Pro. He came down here and worked bees with me one time, and we did an interview a couple of years ago, and we addressed a lot of issues and problems and questions people have about it, using 1 pad versus 2, the temperature concerns, the brood destruction concerns, which it does stop. It does. It creates some issues with the brood, and it looks pretty rough. If you go in there like 3 days after you put it on there, that brood's gonna look a little rough. But the bees, they do. It's almost like a reset, is what I've seen. And I think another thing that will happen, and especially with using 2 pads, I didn't. He kind of recommended 2, but if you decide to go with 1, it may not be as severe. But it will. If you have a queen that is old or weak, it may just take her out. I mean, it may take her out, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you got a weak queen, you don't want her anyway. So.
You're just
anyway, that is a risk, and the temperature is so temperature sensitive. But I didn't have any problems with it. I didn't think it was I didn't see a whole lot of difference in it and like using Apigard as far as because Apigard's got very similar application temperatures and rates and the kind of the way you do it, and so I thought it was kind of a similar reaction as that, because when you put Apigard in there, it kind of shuts her down for a few days as well. They it's usually pretty brief, but
he actually suggested with the Apigard, rather than using if you use the trays, it's a little different, but I use the cards and I usually use the buckets. So I think we've got 4 or 5 downstairs, but
that's what I do.
He said what you can do is actually, instead of putting it in the very center of the nest, he said he'll take 2 boxes where the brood's at, and he'll actually do the same thing I was doing, where he puts another box on top, whether it's a medium super with no frames. He basically gives them a little bit of air room is what he does.
Yeah.
He puts it on top, but what he'll do, rather than put it in the center of where the brood is at, he said, because what it'll cause him to do is it'll force him away from the brood. And at that point in time, you have a brood die off, you have stressors that start to increase at that point. He said he'll take and put it in 4 corners. So basically it doesn't pull them off of the brood nest. So if your brood's concentrated to the center, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames, whatever it might be, he goes, it's less likely they're going to pull them off of that.
Does he cut that pad?
No, that's of the Apigard itself. So the thymol.
Oh, okay.
Does he cut the thymol pad, like the little card in there? Does he cut it up into 4?
That's what he's doing. He didn't say specifically, but I'm assuming that's what he's doing.
And with the heat conditions down here, you can use Apigard in hot temperatures. You have to do like a half dose. I think Mike Berry actually has a protocol he's where he uses 30 grams. I think a full dose is 51 or whatever. Half dose would be like 25 or whatever. So, but I think Mike Berry said you use
33 grams.
He uses 33 grams or whatever. And so I don't know. Last year, what I did when I had my really bad infestation, I used it was in, I think, late September, sometime in September, but it was actually a cool day, and it was going to be cool for a few days. Like when I say cool, I mean within the full dose range. It was like in the 70s. And so I've used a full dose on all my colonies because I had that huge mite infestation on some of my colonies. And so I'm like, I'm going to hit these things hard. And so I used a full dose. Now, I'm not saying this is how you should do it because this is not per protocol. But I waited a week, and then I came back. I think if you use a full dose of Apigard, don't you leave it on there 2 weeks, or is it 10 days? What's the protocol? 2 weeks. Okay, so leave it on there 2 weeks, and then you treat again. Is that right?
Correct.
Or you treat? Okay, so yeah.
So you want a 30-day coverage is what you're looking for.
If you go a full dose, it's 2 weeks between 2 treatments. If you do a half a dose, it's 3 3 treatments a
So
week apart?
basically, a full
Or 10
dose
days apart?
is 100 grams. So you break it up 50 and 50.
I thought it was 52.
Well, it's 100 grams over a month. So you
Over
do,
a month. I see
yeah.
what
So
you're
you
saying.
do
Okay.
50 grams for 2 weeks and another 50 grams. So over that month or 30 days, you got your 100. If you're
I got you.
doing partial doses, you can do 33 grams for
3
10 days,
times.
another 33 for 10 days, and another 33 for 10 days. So you're still at your
I
100
got
over the
you.
course of time. But the idea is that the thymol, much like formic acid, the off gas initially is very hot and heavy. It comes on really strong for about the first 3 days, and then it starts to drop off. So, like you said, if you have low temperatures for 3 or 4 days, hit them with the heavier dose then, because after the first 3 or 4 days, the dose is the off gassing starts to subside a little
Dissipate.
bit, not as powerful.
Yeah. But what I did though last year when I had that high dose, I did a full dose. I let it dissipate, and then a week later, I knew I had 2 weeks before I needed to do a second dose of Apicard, so I hit him with a heavy dose of oxalic acid vapor, and and then I came back a week later, and it was hot again, so I did 2 doses of just half. I call it 25 grams, per hive when the big strong hives, and it absolutely annihilated the mites. Just took them out. And the ones that had been infested, one of them actually was on its way out. It was sick anyway, and it died out. But I think the other one that was pretty high, I think it knocked them way down. And the other colonies that were just the rest of my colony, it really just absolutely annihilated the mites doing that. So I'm not saying I recommend that. I think that when you're dealing with things that are harsh on the bees like Apicard or Formic Pro, you have to be very careful.
Yeah.
And you have to understand there's risk in that. I think there may be some hives that don't do well with it, but man, the bees, it's like the strong bees will just it's like it knocks them back. It kind of resets them.
Yeah.
And then they just go crazy because they're clean. They're healthy. It seems like they're more healthy. And I'm not sure if the Apicard has I know it drives it kills the mites, and it may also have an effect on the beetles. It may help drive them out. I'm not sure about that, but overall, I don't know if it has an effect on the health of the bees as well. Like maybe has any effect on the viruses or diseases they may have. But boy, they sure do seem to look healthy and good. I find that with oxalic acid vapor too, or oxalic acid, the bees just seem to be vibrant after you treat them. They really do. It's kind of weird.
Kent Williams was talking about that. He said that, so first of all, bees have a very poor immune system. That's why that they utilize the propolis inside the colony. That's one of the benefits.
Okay.
Of it. But he said you have 2 different basically viruses, if not really viruses, and I can't remember how he worded it. Some are internal, and the ones that are on the exoskeleton on the outside, they're called virals, is the term that he used, virals. And he said, what you can do with that, he goes, it won't clean up the internal viruses inside the bees themselves. He said, but what it will do is it somehow cleans up the virals on the outside or the exoskeleton of the bees. So basically, I guess in short, if the bees have a small viral load that's internal and they have these viruses that are the virals that are on the outside of their exoskeleton, the way he explains it, he goes, you're basically kind of cleaning that part up. So you're lessening the load or the pressure overall within the colony. And that's probably why you see the difference. Bob Benny talks about that quite often too. He said, I can't explain it, but he said in a couple of videos before, he goes, but the bees look better after the initial shock sets them back a little bit. But when they come back out of it and the queen starts laying again and they get a little bit of nutrition, the bees kind of bounce back. So I don't know. I've heard multiple people say that, and people that are kind of well respected, and there has to be an element of truth there.
It's almost like a reset. But I do know too, even with oxalic acid vapor, and like I said, I use that Roxanne in the spring, and my bees just look. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Like we said earlier, you never know what's going to happen a month from now. They may all just crash. Well, there's Cayman. Cayman's in here now. Cayman and I talked a little bit today. It was nice talking to him, but I think just clean bees are just healthier bees, and they just are happier. And I know there are some people that do that, the treatment free stuff, and they have developed these lines that are pretty resistant to things. And I think that's great. But, I just, whatever I've done this year, and I think part of his Mother Nature has been good to us down here this year. We've had a really good year. And so, but the bees are just looking overall just better than I think they ever have. And I think it's genetics. I think it's hopefully the treatments have helped.
Mm-hmm.
The nutrition's been good. I've given them the space they needed. And they're just healthy, happy bees. They weren't happy when we were ripping the boxes apart, but overall they're pretty healthy and happy bees right now. And so hopefully this treatment will get the mite load down and hopefully we can keep the beetles out of them and we can continue to have some healthy bees moving into winter and on into next spring.
Yeah, your bees did a good job of producing you some good honey harvest now. So
someone was asking me today,
right?
Someone was asking me today, we ended up with over 11,000 pounds this year, and which is by far a record for me. We broke the record by 30 plus or minus buckets this year, and so I thought it was a lot last year, and it was a lot more this year. But I was thinking about it, and I think we only pulled from around 100 colonies, if that many. Maybe it was a few more than that, but not much. And so when you average that out on average, that's probably 100 plus pounds per colony on average. It's not a bad average, some of them obviously have more, some of them had less, but that's not too shabby. I think the average in Alabama typically is around 60, 65 pounds maybe, or give or take, and it has been in the past. I'm not sure in recent years, but I just can't complain about that. Can't complain about that productivity, and it's just been a lot of work. But I do feel like Cayman and I talked about this today. I just think I'm getting more efficient, and it's not that I don't consider myself even to be really extremely or really great beekeeper, or even maybe a good beekeeper, but I've just become more efficient and I'm just more attentive to kind of what's going on, and so it's just an experience thing. And the efficiency is the biggest thing because I can stay on top of things a little bit better. I don't get behind as much as I used to. I still stay behind, it feels like, all the time, but it used to be like I just wouldn't get stuff done because I just was behind or I didn't know what to do, and I would kind of felt paralyzed a little bit as to what to do. But when we were going through those colonies on Saturday, putting those treatments in, we came across a few that were just super weak, just didn't have many bees. When you pull the lid off, instead of seeing bees covering all the frames, there's just like not hardly any bees in the second box. You dive down into the brood box and there's just a few little bees down there not doing a whole lot. And instead of trying to nurse them along and figure out what to do, we just took those two boxes and we found single deep somewhere else that needed a box, and we just put them on top, and people will say, well, you can't do that, but that actually will strengthen it'll strengthen the weak colony, obviously, and the colony that needed room anyway, it'll give them a few extra bees and more comb. And so you just can't take a lot of time and just sit there and think about it and worry about it and what am I going to do, and should I treat, should I dump them out, should I do whatever. So we just we slapped them together. What is dial it in? Yeah. You got your dial there?
You got to dial it in.
Yeah, I've got to find my dial, Brian. It was out of my truck and I can't find it now. I did something when I was doing honey. I put it somewhere. So I've been through two of those things. I've got them around here somewhere, but if you can see what's behind the computer here, it's a mess.
They're like hack tools.
Yeah, they are.
You're going to leave them everywhere.
Anyway, but I appreciate Cayman gave me a call today. We had a nice conversation. We talked about it. He gave me a lot of good ideas. He always does. Of course, I always like to pick his brain whenever he calls me, and he's just a good dude trying to help us all out. I appreciate that, Cayman.
Yeah. What you're saying, experience, that's so true, because like the other day, when I found that one colony, I was just trying to assess ones that didn't have supers on. I thought, well, let me peek and I'll just do a quick assessment. That way I'll know where it's at. So when I go to treat, I kind of know where each hive is situated. And I found the one that didn't have a queen, and it's like years back. My initial thing, I'd be thinking, oh man, I'm in trouble. I got to get on the phone. I got to do this. I could do that. I just went over to another colony that I knew was larger, that they could afford to sacrifice the frames of brood, and one that was actually, pretty darn packed out. And I just pulled those frames out, moved them over, and it's like close things up, and you just move on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember my mentor, his wife, and she would help him with the bees. They'd be out there working. She worked just as hard as he did with the bees, and there'd be a nuke sitting there that had bees that they'd be trying to add queens to it, and it wouldn't grow, it wouldn't do anything, and he would just tell her, he's like, just dump them out and move on, but she just couldn't do it. And
yeah,
that's just, we're all that way a little bit, I think, but right now, this time of the year, they have to have bees and they have to be full of bees. They have to have population to control the dang pests that are in them, to keep the beetles, and just keep themselves healthy. And so you get in a hive right now that's just wimpy here in the heat and humidity with all the different pests and stuff that are out there, and that colony is not going to
They're in a bad
survive.
spot.
And it's just going to be and it could be because the queen is failing. It might be an older queen. That could be a lot. I think that's what it is a lot of the time, or possibly because I haven't been in them in so long. Maybe that hive swarmed and they just didn't requeen, or maybe right now they're in the process of requeening. But I just don't have time or the energy right now to just wait, and so I just stick them onto their colony, or I figured out. And so now all my colonies, I think, pretty much have 2 boxes. Some of them were single deeps before this past weekend, but I just added them and tried to get them all up to 2 boxes. In the spring, I'm a little more patient with them, because in the spring sometimes they are requeening. Sometimes you come back a week or 2 later and they've got a queen in there. Most of the time they do, actually. This time of the year it's a little different. This time of the year you just can't be you got to be a little more what's the word I'm looking for? A little more ruthless with them sometimes. You just gotta make sure that you give them a chance, the best chance you can. And if they're on their way out, why not just combine them with another colony that's going to utilize those resources? Plus, that way I don't have to take the boxes and try and store them somewhere. I'll put them on a colony that'll guard them, and it'll help that colony out. And also they can guard that comb, so I don't have to take it back to the barn and try and store it somewhere and risk it getting destroyed by hive beetles.
You know what I'm going to do when I do my OA also? I got a box of it's the bulk form of the bee bites that I'm going to get a couple doses of that on them. I'll probably hit them like July. It'll probably be August. I'll probably see how September's looking as far as nutrition that Mother Nature's giving them. But like in the middle of the summer here, I'm going to bee bite some. That way, I'm helping out with their gut.
So Tom, I got a question for you. That we were just talking about efficiency, and what are some tips and tricks that you use to be more efficient in the bee yard? You already mentioned one. I think when you pull the honey, you try to, if you can, assess and put mite treatments in while you're pulling. We did that last year and it was successful. This year we couldn't do it. We had too much to try and get done. But what are some tips and tricks you would give to people to be more efficient in the bee yard?
Well, the first thing that I would say, we started off, and after about year 3, so as a brief introduction, Melissa and I really only planned on having a few colonies in our yard. Well, I've got 215 colonies right now. I have no idea how that happened. All I can say is, and I've said this before many a time, so anybody that knows me in the chat will understand this. I don't do well sitting still. Okay, I'm a guy that if the sun's out, I'm up and I'm working. I'm doing something.
He's up and driving everybody nuts.
Yeah, if Melissa just said I'm up and driving everybody nuts. So
you're going to catch another shoe.
The devil's playground. So I'm a guy who doesn't do well sitting still unless I'm engaged, right? So the short of it would be, one of the things that I've noticed early on, after about year 3, when I was really starting to get, I want to say overwhelmed, because again, I own a landscaping business. So the two things, they clash. Whenever the only months I have off are usually January and February. And it kind of depends on what is happening with the weather there, because we plow snow and stuff as well. But so I don't get a lot of time off, which works well for me. But I noticed very quickly that when we started gaining a lot of traction with our colonies, and I started getting up somewhere around the 70-ish, 80 mark, I realized that I had a few different types of equipment going. And that was a huge pain. So one of the first things I would say, if somebody is scaling, you need to have all of your equipment the exact same. Will be the first tip that I would give somebody. If you just have a handful of hives, probably doesn't make a lot of difference. If you have one location, probably doesn't make a lot of difference. I would say the second thing that I do is, for a kid today, it's probably not a lie. The second thing is, when we try to set the colonies up early. So when we super, I don't pull supers back off to dive down into colonies. It's heavy. If I'm being honest, I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to that. But what's interesting is, if you look at enough bee colonies and you have for instance, most of our yards have anywhere between 15 and probably 35 colonies. She goes out there and distracts me, Brian. But so when we have that many
He
colonies,
looked over at her.
from the comfort of your vehicle with the air condition on and you with all these supers on these colonies, and as you're driving down them, you can look at the entrances and you can learn a lot about what is happening in the colonies. If they're bringing in nectar, I can hear it. I can hear the hum of the colonies drying the nectar down. So you don't need to go back in and inspect every colony unless you have multiple ones that look the same, but then one of them looks like it has a low population. I'll actually pull supers and dive down into it to figure out why. So I guess the short answer is when the supers are on, I don't do a lot of management in there. We're still kind of handling some splits, growing them, moving stuff around. But I don't know. The two things I would say is have all the same equipment and learn to utilize just good observation skills. It can tell you a lot about what's happening in a colony.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I did. That's what I've started doing. I mentioned earlier, late March, early April. Honestly, I put that Varoxan on, and you're supposed to take it out in 6 weeks, but I started stacking honey supers and didn't do it on a lot of them. But and that they actually chew that stuff out, and most of those strips are mostly gone anyway by the end of the treatment period. So, but I will say that is very wise, I think, to do that. And you can tell, like, if you got a box that you've started stacking honey supers up, it's got 3 honey supers on it, maybe a double deep or whatever management you run, you got 3 supers on there, and you pull the lid off in the middle of a honey flow and there's no bees in the top box and they haven't filled it with any honey. Well, there might be a problem. It might be time then to go down and dive into the brood chamber. But otherwise, if everything looks healthy, if you pull it up, the bees are the white wax everywhere, putting honey in there, bees on the front, bearding on the front or whatever. There's no need to go down and do a deep dive in that hive. I think when you do that, you also disturb what the bees are doing. Sometimes you might mess up your production a little bit if you start breaking those things apart when they're right in the middle of trying to produce. You start going in the brood chamber and pulling frames out and messing around, and just that's what I've started doing too the last few years. Actually, just kind of leaving them alone unless I detect there's a problem. Mm-hmm. Another thing for honey production that worked for me this year, and I did it. I've done it a little bit in the past, but this year I was kind of ruthless with it. Is about 2 or 3 weeks, during the honey flow, I would just go around and kind of check the bees about every week or so, just kind of look and see like what we talked, just kind of peek in on them and drive through and just see how they're looking. And if I would go to a hive that I had stacked honey supers on, or maybe it's a double deep with a queen excluder and a honey super, and there was no honey in that, I've got a hive that's 4 or 5 supers high over here, right on one side, and this hive over here's got 1 super on it, and there's nothing in it. They're not filling it up. I might not go down and really inspect that colony. I don't have time, but I'll take that super off and put it on the strong one. I did a video on it called it "Robbing the Poor to Give to the Rich." And that way you maximize honey production because, many of those, I think I made a lot of boxes of honey this year, probably 15 to 20 boxes, maybe more, because I took from some of the weaker ones that weren't getting filled. Even if I stacked it on a tall one and they just didn't fill it, maybe they had 3 supers and I put a 4th one on there and the 3 supers were still fine, but they just didn't move up into that 4th one for whatever reason. Took that one and put it on one that had 3 or 4 next to it, that the bees were just busting out the top. They were just so full. And they would fill those things right up. And so I think that's another max honey soup. It's really just an easy thing to do. You just kind of crack them open, go through the yard, just look in there real quickly and peek in and just take from the weak and give to the strong. And, then want to do that other times of the year. But for honey production, I think that's smart to do. And
yeah,
I really think that helped maximize my honey production this year. I had a lot of those most of those boxes I did that with a couple of weeks before the end of the flow. They filled them right up. And if they stayed on the weaker colony, they wouldn't have put honey in it, and I wouldn't have had that super honey. And so those are just a few little tips, but efficiency too. I think you'd agree, Tom and Brian, both. You kind of have to have a goal when you go in the colonies. Don't just
absolutely.
Now, when you're new and you're just getting started, I think it's great to go in and just learn how to work the bees, just go in and check out every frame and all that stuff. But as you get more efficient, you just need to know, hey, today is a assessment day, or today is assessment and treat day. Today is whatever. And today we're going to add supers. Today we're going to do that. You kind of have to have a plan when you go out there, especially if you're trying to be efficient. And then just, if you just want to see if you got a queen, just pull a frame out, look for eggs, see the eggs, just close it up and move on. You don't have to go through every frame. You don't have to see the queen. So
that's the same.
Those are a few tricks. Yeah.
We went through, and some of the parent colonies I hadn't, we're getting ready to pull, and some of the parent colonies I had not been down in for a while. So what I did is I would go to the supers. I pop a couple supers and look in there and look at the population. If the population was heavy, I'm like, the colony's clean, right? I'm not worried about it. If the population seemed a little bit low or the entrance seemed low, I dive down to the brood nest. And the first thing I do is I don't start pulling a bunch of frames. I go to the center and I pull the frame out and start looking at it. If I see eggs and multiple stages of larvae and I see some nice pools of the milky substance down the bottom of them, I put it back, close it up. I'm like, the queen's there. Everything's fine. Put it back together and then move on.
Yeah, Tom, you know what you just said, though? You can't do that, man. You can't pull the frame out of the middle. Don't you know that?
I do it all day long.
You're not supposed, man. I'm telling you, you're going to roll that queen every single time. That's you just broke every beekeeping rule.
Yeah, I know, right?
Listen, no, that is true though. I think it's good if you can to start on out towards the edge, but if you're careful, I don't know how many times I've pulled frames out and the queen was on the outside. She was on that next to last frame over there, even on the outside frame. So, but I think as long as you're careful, you kind of take your hive tool and you kind of spread the frames apart a little bit and you don't just yank them out real fast, you're going to be okay with that. But I did that's exactly what we did this past weekend, putting treatments in, popped the lid off, pulled a frame out of the middle of the top box. And lots of times there was, if it was nothing but honey up there, we would go in the bottom box, but lots of times there's a little bit of brood in the middle frames in the top box. And we'd save 1 or 2 frames in the middle, put it back together, slap the treatments in, set that box off to the side, go in the deep bottom box, and maybe pull a frame out of the middle and just look and see, once again, see eggs or see that, healthy looking brood, see any type of larvae in there, put treatments in, put it together and go. And so, that's kind of exactly, what you described is exactly what we do. But then again, you got to,
another thing you got too is when you see the young larvae down in the bottom of it, if you see that they're dry, that means there's poor nutrition in the colony. So that's something to recognize as well. You need to see a lot of that milky substance sitting down the bottom. If you see that it's dry, there's a nutrition issue going on there and you need to correct it. You're not perfect that we can't supply what Mother Nature can.
Tom, you're assuming that people take these things with them to the bee yard.
Well, Tom's not, he doesn't have to use those things. I don't think
well, my eyes aren't quite what they used to be. And particularly today when I had sweat in them, I couldn't hardly see anything. I pulled the frame out and handed it to Melissa. I'm like, is there eggs in here? I was just trying to wipe the sweat through my face and there was just insane. But I had a goal to finish up and she'd say, yep, put it back in there, close it down, throw the supers back on. And I'm like, move to the next one, flip the lid off and just keep going.
Hey, Tom, we got a question here and I didn't know from Jimmy's Neighborhood Bees. That's a good question because you mentioned standardizing your equipment. Do you use all one size box?
I don't.
Or do you have
actually? So I actually use. So just for reference, I'm an 8-frame guy. We started that from the beginning. I did end up buying some 10-frame equipment along the way as I buy operations out, but then I consolidated everything back down and went straight back to 8-frame. Primarily, I run a double deep brood box in 8-frame. I do that because it allows me a little bit more leeway as far as swarm management in the springtime. If I don't get back to a bee yard for 2 or 3 weeks, it buys me time. I like the idea of having my brood nest and having plenty of honey on top of them. And I'm probably sacrificing a little bit of honey, but I'm actually okay with that. My sole purpose in beekeeping is not to produce honey. It's actually to grow bees. So, the goals can make a difference in how you manage something. So I keep that in there. All of my supers for extracted honey are all mediums and all of my cut combs, they're all shallow. So I can go out to a bee yard and just drive in front of it and count real quickly from the comfort of my truck and the air conditioner and say, I've got 35 supers out here. I've got 5 cut combs in there, and I can keep track all that stuff on an app on my phone that Melissa set up for us. And I don't know, it's just the way that I kind of do it. So I'm not as eager to want to pull off, a 10-frame box can weigh 90 to 100 pounds if it's completely full. An 8-frame box probably closer to 70, 80 pounds, and I'm not that eager to want to lift up those boxes any more than I have to. So I just like the idea of mediums. It's a little bit lighter. They're easy to manage. And again, from a distance, I can see how many supers I have on. So it's the method that I've chose. I'm not saying it works well for everybody, but for the way that I like to operate, deep is my brood box, medium is my extracted honey, and shallows are my cut comb. And just for reference, we don't do a lot of cut comb. This is kind of our second year and really dabbling into it. We've really tried to focus and kind of hone in our skills and kind of really dial some things in. in regards to beekeeping and equipment and such. I've changed my mind a few times about how I've done some equipment and things like that, but overall we've stuck with the 8 frame. And I don't know, it works. Works for me.
Yeah. I mean, I run 10 frame equipment, but I have almost the exact same philosophy as you. And I think actually people will debate you about this. Single brood management, double brood management, deep/medium. I have some of all of it, but to me, a super strong double deep, just busting with bees, has such a humongous field force that they can produce just tons of honey. Absolutely. And if you stay on top of your bees, if you're watching them, if you're managing them, I think you can do single brood pretty good. I had some this year that had, I think there were some splits even from the spring with Zach's Queens that had like I actually, the reason I did single brood management on them is because they maybe didn't look quite as strong. I started off in nukes and they moved into the 10 frame on the pallet. Then all of a sudden they started to explode. So when they started to fill that box up, I thought, well, I'll just try and get a box or two of honey off this brand new colony. And the next thing I know, they're packing them through. I've got like 5 supers on there that they've just glued the top down, and they just almost need more. And so, but typically I like my favorite is double deep, because then it's so much easier. Like right now, I went out this weekend to put treatments in, and those bees, when we condense them down, we pull all the supers off, pull the queen excluder off, just put the lid on and leave them alone after we take the honey. Bees bearding everywhere. The boxes are covered with bees, right? Just full of bees. Well, you open those things up, man, and they were just so heavy. Like the top box is full of food, a little bit of brood in the middle. The bottom box has, in the healthy ones, has a significant amount, probably 4 or 5 frames of brood, and maybe 1-2 frames in the top box. Full of honey, food is ready. Like they're almost ready for winter, right? I mean, they're pretty much set up for winter. They're going to get through the next couple of months without any problems. Plenty of bees, plenty of brood, plenty of food. They're just set up. I think if you run single brood management, sometimes you run into the issue where you become very brood heavy. Like the bottom box is full of brood because that's where they pack everything. If you take all the honey off, then you have to feed, or you have to count on them filling a super up with food. And so I do think that single brood management is okay. It's fine. It's good. A lot of people run that. But for me, because I can't be in them all the time and checking them all the time and feeding them all the time, to me, double deep is more forgiving. I guess that's the word I use, is more forgiving. You don't have to be in them as much or check on them or watch them as much. And so, but the ones that were the single brood management, where I pulled the excluders off, the supers off, those are the ones that we stack some of the ones that were weaker on top of, or if they were nearly a dead out, we put the comb on them. So they can move on up now and they can take over that space, because they had tons and tons of bees. And now they can, if there's any little food that comes in, they can bring it in or whatever, but they'll be fine. Swarming is not really an issue right now. We have an occasional swarm here or there in the summertime, but it's really pretty rare. Yeah. And so, and now they're just starting to kind of settle into this summer routine and hopefully get ready for winter. But it just, to me, it's just so much more forgiving, the double brood management. And I think they do bring in, to me, I stack them up just like, they stack them up just as high. I mean, they bring in 4, 5, 6 boxes of honey. Yeah. And there's such a huge field force, and they're able to, really move freely, and they can use that second deep box for honey. I mean, they do put some honey in there, but that's for themselves. I don't mind them having some honey for themselves. I don't want to take every drop they have typically. That's just kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, same here.
I'm liking my singles.
Yeah. Well, it depends on, it depends on your management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Brian, what do you do? What do you do when you do single management in your case? I know you've been working out the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. So with honey management, obviously the bees are down in the bottom box. I mean, it's really a beautiful thing when they fill that bottom box up with brood. But when you take the honey off, then how do you make sure they have enough food for winter? What's your strategy on that?
So I'm kind of like a hybrid single, because I've got a deep and then I've got a medium. And that very first medium that's on there, I never extract that box.
Okay.
That's theirs. And like towards the ending of the year, I pull my excluder off. So there are times where the queen will go up and lay some in that medium. But that is just theirs. So I'm kind of like a hybrid. Depending on the time of the year, they have a deep and a medium. Other times of the year, she's just down in the deep. Mm-hmm. So, and like you said, though, too, I mean, every single time I go over, and if I'm checking brood nests just to see how things look, every single time when I pull an outer frame, there's at least for the colonies that I have, there's at least 2 or 3 times that it'll happen. I pull an outer frame like they tell you to give space, and the queen's running around on that outer frame. Because single brood, that she's limited to that space. So as long as you're careful, you're not going to rule things. But yeah, I'm kind of like my single brood management is, I tell people it's not a traditional, it's kind of like a hybrid system. Because sometimes, they're in 2, sometimes, the queen's down in 1. So, and it's worked. I mean, but like you said too, when you're doing singles, you got to be on top of them. Because there was like the weather here, we had those storms and that were rolling through pretty good in June, and I couldn't get over there, just with my work schedule and everything else going on. There was like a 10 or 12 day period where I could not get over to do any inspections. I couldn't add boxes. I couldn't do anything. And then when I finally went over there, there was like 2 or 3 of the packages that I had that were backfilling the brood nest. They had cells, and I'm like, here we go.
It's just so you have to be on top of it, but that, I mean, that's fine. I don't think it's, like I say, there's really so many ways to do it. So it's just, I love to see what people are doing. I found out my favorite management, I think, is double deeps, but I do have a lot of deep and mediums. And through the wintertime, I try to keep them in 2 boxes, whether it be a deep and a medium or 2 deeps. And then that makes splitting so easy in the spring. They start to move up. They start to grow. You got a double deep. You can just, theoretically, you can shake all the bees down, let them come back up, take the top box off, put the queen excluder, let them out, take the top box off, put the queen in. You know what I mean? It's just so easy. Or you can put a queen, even easier almost, you can put a queen excluder in between the 2 deep boxes and just check for eggs the next week. And wherever the eggs are, the other boxes where it needs the queen, take that one. Or it's just so, with double deeps, it's just, there's just so many, it's just going to be so easy to do things. And
my spring,
that's just what I like to do.
My spring, what I did this year, and it worked out, where I come out of winter and I've got the deep and the medium, I don't have a queen excluder. I'll typically, once the queen is laying up top, I'll let her go a little bit. I kind of watch the number of frames just because I don't want her to lay up that entire super. I like to keep that comb kind of clean. But when she lays up a little bit, I'll throw an excluder on there and keep her down in that lower box. The brood that's up there, it emerges out. It's fine, and because I'm never going to extract those frames, it doesn't matter. I mean, if there is some old brood comb that gets up there, it doesn't matter, but that's my typical flow, is like, let them come out of the winter, get to a certain point, and it's just by assessing the queen's performance. Okay, then I throw an excluder on, and then I get into swarm management, adding supers, things like that. But it's worked for me. I actually prefer this over the double deeps. I mean, the double deeps are a little bit more forgiving, and like for splits, like the guy that I was working with, that I've been mentoring, like he was asking me because he's seen my setup, and I said, for right now, his goal is he's already in Tom when he when he did the old finger and tasted the honey. We're walking away afterwards, and when we were just talking about the next time I come over and stuff like that, he was like, how many, Greg, thank you much. It's good. He said, just got in. So that's good. That's good that Greg got home. He was driving through some weather and stuff like that. But, Mike was saying, how many colonies you think I could get next year? And for double deeps, like I was telling him exactly like what you were saying there, Bruce. I said, Mike, you can take your colonies. If you want to go conservative about it, you have 2 deeps. Throw the excluder on there, figure out where your queen is next time, and just move a box. You're not worrying about shift and frames and all that. You just move box. Now, if you want to go a little bit more aggressive at it, you could split your colonies a couple different ways. But yeah, double deeps, they are easy as far as splitting things.
I like the idea of what you're doing, Brian. So if you're not a person who would build and sell nucleus colonies, which predominantly are going to be used with deep frames, I think what you're doing is probably almost perfect, because if you're thinking about it, you're 10 frame equipment, correct?
Oh yeah, I'm all 10s.
If you have if those queen or if those bees have drawn out those frames efficiently on both sides and they have multiple cells, I mean, they're beautiful. It's going to be very difficult for a queen to lay, even at her max peak, to fill out more than that 10 frame box. So basically that medium allows for a little bit of, you need a little bit of bee bread in there and pollen storage. Yep. You need nectar, and you need a little bit of capped honey in there, still to keep that perfect size. So in my thought process, if you would super from there, you're really maximizing everything. But okay, so thinking about it from my perspective, I like the double deep because I do like to sell a lot of nukes. We sold roughly about 100 nukes this spring. A few of them we donated to the North Carolina folks, but about 100 nukes this spring. And then we rebuilt all those nukes about 3.5 weeks later after we pulled the core of the nuke out, put them in a box, sold them off. We rebuilt what was left there, and then we used that for our own increase basically right thereafter. So since most people are looking for deep frames for a nucleus colony, which is kind of standard, not the mediums, for me, it wouldn't work, because if I do a deep and a medium, as the queen moves up and the bees move up over wintertime, coming into the spring, they're going to be in the medium frame. So I need as many brood frames as I can possibly get.
Yeah.
Deep brood frames, that is. So for me, that operation wouldn't work. So I think for you on working at honey production, you are not selling nukes. I think that is the most efficient use of the equipment that you have.
Yeah.
The second thing I'll point out is, for me anyway, and this is my own personal, I am extremely OCD about things. So when I see brood that happens in my medium supers, I'm like, what's going on? You know what I mean? And I'm like, now I have to worry about them wax moths going after my medium combs. So I have to guard those much more. But if you're keeping those on the colonies, it's a non-issue for you, right?
Right.
Pulling those off and setting them aside. So it really, again, it isn't about people doing things right and wrong. It's about how it works for you, your management style, what you like. Maybe you even have some capabilities as far as what you're able to lift. I would then tell people, don't use deep boxes, use mediums. Greg Tower. Oh my gosh, this guy, Philip.
So yeah, we're still on here 2 hours and 6 minutes in, or 2 hours and 4 minutes in. So Tom's done a pretty good
Bruce's
job.
fault. It's not mine.
Right. Yeah. No, that has worked. I mean, and like I said, I will never harvest that medium, and like standardization too. Like all of I've got 2 Apame setups over there, and then I've got one other setup that's painted that I'm going to end up getting that thing out of there. But like my deep and mediums, they're all going to be themed hives. They're all wax dipped. So it's just, when I look out there, it's just a standardized yard. Everything is just going to be uniform,
Mm-hmm.
So it's been good. I mean, I haven't had any, there hasn't been any type of problem or issue that's really jumped out at me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the couple minor things, okay, yeah, they backfilled the nest a little bit. Well, that's because I couldn't get over there. Yeah. Mother Nature was telling me, hey, we're raining, and then in the times when it wasn't raining, I was working and had other stuff, and I couldn't get over there.
Yeah.
But had I been over there once a week, like I like to be, it would have been no issue. There would have been no problem at all.
Hey, Brian, do we have any starred comments we need to look at, or questions real quick, or pretty much good?
This is the two of you gents. I will let the two of you fight over this, because I will never be able to answer this question. It says,
get
to 100 colonies. I'll never get there.
We've kind of talked about this a little bit. I don't do a lot of really full inspections. I rarely do I look at every frame. Tom, would you agree with that? So
Yeah, very seldom
I,
do I.
I guess if you're trying to do splits and you're trying to pull frames out for nukes or for whatever, they may be more thorough, but or if it's a new colony, like a new nuke that you've created, or you're going through something like a brand new colony and just looking at the healthy colony, maybe. But man, most of the time it's just let's make sure we got eggs,
Yeah.
and if we got eggs, we move on. Or if you make sure, pull out a couple frames, look at the health of the frames, like what we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most difficult things still for me is just finding the darn queen. If I want to find her and mark her, I just have a hard time with that. But I usually do. It's crazy how if I'm not looking for her, I find her a lot.
Yeah.
If I'm looking for her, I have the hardest time finding them. I do like that about Zach's queens because most of them have big old gold yellow butts, so they you see them pretty easily because they're just the darker queens are so hard for me to find. We get and they're beautiful, but the darker the queen is, the harder it is for me to find them. Sometimes I'll go through a box 2 or 3 times, even at like a nuke, and I can't find them.
Yeah.
But unless you're trying to find the queen, or unless you just want it or have a need to go through every frame, I really do complete inspections. It's more just look at a couple things to make sure they're healthy and just move on because you got to move quicker when you got 100+ colonies.
Yeah. The only time I would say that I'm really like my first inspection of the year for me, timing wise, is probably around late February, the first part of March. And the only thing I'm assessing at that point in time is I'm not breaking through a brood nest at that point. I'm in St. Louis for reference. So we get kind of a little bit of both of everything, so right about the middle of the country. I just go in there and I assess weight. I want to make sure that they have food. That's the only thing I'm looking for. I don't go diving into the brood nest because at that point in time, let's just say, for instance, I don't need to see the queen and I don't need to see eggs because for me in late February or March, if there was no queen there, what am I going to do? I don't have any options. So it makes no difference if I look for brood or anything. I just want to assess weight. If I look and I see a good size cluster in there, you can do that by splitting boxes. So my advice to somebody new is when you want to count frames of bees, don't do it from the top. Do it from the bottom. If you have a double brood box, split the boxes and look at the bottom of the frames. You can count how many frames of bees you have accurately from the bottom. Again, the top will give you a false read. They'll spread out on the top.
Oh yeah,
those frames. So it's a false read.
That's how they assess for almonds and for pollination. They assess them. They just pick up the bottom of the box and look on the bottom.
Yeah, it'll take about 3 seconds.
Yeah, they're real quick at that. Now, if you've got a double deep, sometimes if you don't see a lot of bees down there, you can look in the top. If they're all packed up in the top, if they moved up, that's one thing. But typically, they just pull up tip the box so you see the bottom, and you can tell a good strong colony. There's no doubt about it when you tip it up that way.
That's right.
Yeah, I've learned that's one important as far as like evaluating. I've learned that's so important. I just tip those boxes up. And you're not really fully lifting it. You're just tipping it up. Yeah. And when you look on that underside, you can really tell what's going on with that colony.
Yeah.
Because you do get an accurate picture then, population-wise, you can see, are they drawing any cups? Are there any cells? You can see a lot just by tipping that box up.
Oh yeah, you can see whether you have honey frames, whether there's brood inside there. It's going to be difficult from a tip up to see if there's eggs or larvae, but you can see capped frames. So if you're just looking for that, put them back together. But yeah, like Bruce said, we don't really go in and do full inspections. So I would say the only time I'm really tearing a colony apart is if it's gotten to the point that there are swarm cells in there. I'm like, at that point, I feel like I have to find the queen at that point because I usually end up moving her is what I do. So if you're still trying to keep that colony in honey production, maybe you don't move her. I would say it depends on, if you have a cap cell or not cap cell. There's always risk and there's always trade-offs in everything you do inside of a colony, right? There's never almost never 100% guarantee on anything. You're just assessing risk and you're trying to mitigate it. I've said this before as beekeepers, I think you're just a manipulator. You're not going to change the mind of what the bees are hardwired to do. And you're just trying to play on what that their hardwired senses are and manipulate the situation to get your desired outcome.
And I agree with that so much. That's one thing I've just tried to do is let the bees be bees.
Yeah.
And I just don't get bent out of shape when I see certain things. Like if I see swarm cells, I'm like, I got to stop them from swarming. I'm like, well, if they swarm, I get a new queen out of it, and I may try some things. I may split them. I may move, I may break a few of the cells down, but I just don't I don't just stop and I don't worry I honestly just don't worry too much about it. I feel like that some people just really get upset if the thought of a hive swarming, but I know over the years, I've had a lot of hives swarm and they've just replaced the queen. I never even knew about it.
Mhm.
They didn't even skip a beat because that's what they do in nature. I mean, that's what they're wired to do. Now, if they swarm out, if they swarm and swarm and swarm and swarm, you can be in trouble. I do try to give them space and keep the queen age younger. I think that helps keep them from swarming. But every once in a while, I just walk out in the bee yard. There's a swarm hanging there, and I don't know which hive it came from. I don't go through all my colonies to see if I got 30 colonies in a spot. I don't want to go through every single one and try and figure it out. And if I do figure it out, then what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I just kind of let them do their thing. And I go into a colony and I see supersedure cells hanging there. I mean, oh my gosh, they're going to supersede the queen. Well, maybe she needs to go.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just what they want to do, and maybe they know what's going on better than I do. And so, the more I get into the bees, and the more I'm around the bees, and the more I do bees, the less I get concerned when I see bees being bees.
That's right.
I just don't worry as much about it as I used to. And I've even had colonies where I open them up. I'm sure you guys have both seen this, and you'll open up their swarm cells in there, and you got like virgin queens just hatching everywhere. Like they're hatching here and there and here, and they got 4 virgin queens running around. And I'm like, well, holy crap, what do I do with this? And I just close it up and come back in a couple of weeks, and there's a new queen in there, and they're doing just fine. And they've just, they figured it out. So
yeah,
of course, the danger with that is they swarm like 5 times and you don't have any bees left. But that's not the norm. What I found is they usually just figure it out pretty good. So that's just, maybe I've got a bad attitude, but I just don't worry as much about it. I can't worry about it. If I worried about it, it would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Oh,
the only thing I would point out to somebody letting the colony swarm. So like, for instance, where Bruce and I have bees at, they're fairly, and I don't know all his yards, but looking at his videos, they're non-populated areas. So it's kind of a non-issue. If you lose a swarm here,
sure.
It's really not a big deal. If you live in a metropolitan area, the only thing I would caution somebody is do your due diligence and give it your best effort to make sure that they don't swarm, because I found this in a couple of municipalities around the St. Louis area. What happens is people who don't understand bees and they don't know bees, they freak out about it. So if they see a swarm hanging, they're like, oh my gosh, they're aggressive. If they see them flying around. So the perception is a little bit different from a non-beekeeper to a beekeeper. So if they get into somebody's home and then they have to pay somebody like me $1,000, $1,500 to come in and cut it out, that tends to upset them and they want to blame somebody for that. So as good stewards of our bees, if you live in a highly populated area, do your best to not let them swarm. If they're in a field somewhere, it's not an issue. I mean, it really doesn't matter that much. I mean, you're the only one that's going to suffer at that point.
It's true.
I've seen municipalities build different regulations or laws, if you will, about you can only have this many colonies, or some places we're trying to ban them entirely. And then it becomes a fight to try to get it implemented back. So you're kind of, so it's best as beekeepers that we don't tie up our own hands, basically, is kind of what I'm getting at.
Right.
Especially in a metropolitan setting. That's the area when it really becomes a little bit more difficult because of the lack of understanding from a non-beekeeper. So that would be my only advice to somebody that has, in there. But
man, we could just go on all night long.
I know this.
So it always works out.
Oh yeah. Everybody that has given super chats, super stickers, whatever they are, I want to say thank you. But this one here, I do want to answer this question. It's from Justin. Brian, it says the Hex Hive only costs $70. Do I need to buy a printer? Where does the cluster hang out in those? So Justin, when you buy the Hex Hives, how I got them, it was just the files that then you have to print the setup. So it's whatever the cost is for the files, it's like $70. That's just for the design. And then you have to buy the filament and print it. I think for the 3 deep setup that I printed, it was $200 and some. So it was consider there was a considerable difference if you compare if you're going to buy a 10 frame wooden setup versus the hex hive. It was probably, I think, twice the amount of money. I did it because, I like to tinker. As far as the cluster, the one thing I have noticed about that hex hive, and this is very, very interesting, and I don't even want to start this conversation because I know, Tom, you would be, we would go down the rabbit hole on this discussion. With that hex hive, how it is set up, it's set up, there's 15 frames in a box, and there's 3 sections of 5. Those bees have used every single inch of every frame in each deep. I haven't had to manipulate. Like typically on 10 frames, your outer edges, they don't really touch. So you manipulate, you move and shift some frames around. With that hex hive, it does not matter which frame I pull, every single inch of that frame is being utilized. So as far as performance wise, on like the foundation, that hex hive has outperformed any other hive that I have over there. Now, could it be a fluke? Who knows? I just have one of them. As far as the infrared, I will watch that thing more in the winter. This is my first year with that thing, with bees in it. But it's where all of my other packages are in like a deep and a medium, and some of them graduated to a second medium. I am going to have to crush and strain some honey out of that hex hive. They have completely built out 3 deeps. So I don't know, like setup wise, because it's like a hollowed out log. I have no idea, but that thing has performed exceptionally well. But yeah, Justin, if you're considering it, you buy the files, and then you got a nice printer as well. You can't have just a small printer. So if you're thinking about it, check the dimensions that you are going to need, and check the print bed so that you could accommodate those large pieces. So, but it is a slick setup. I mean, I can't say nothing bad about it. I actually tomorrow am going to chat with Luke, who's the creator, and then his dad did a lot of the CAD design work. I got a call scheduled with the 2 of those guys. They just want to pick my brain. And one of the ideas that I have, and I know DC mentioned it and a couple other people said, is I want to see if they can come up with a dividing type system. So in that hex, you can split each 5 frame section into its own colony. So that way I could then use that hex hive as like a queen castle. Because each side has an entrance. You just plug them up. So, but yeah, that thing is a slick setup. And we could go, Tom, I know how you get into analyzing things. We could talk for an hour on that. So
I feel like you're trying to sell me on a new hive design. I don't need it.
I've had, trust me, when I put those videos out, I know I'm going to get, a couple folks that are going to chat about the plastic and things like that.
Yeah.
Everybody, they say about the R value. Well, you can control the thickness of your infill. So I printed it with a higher infill. So the R value of my setup is actually like a couple points higher than wood.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as far as insulation, I'm not going to do much with that thing just because I want to see how it performs in a Northeast Ohio winter.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, how the setup with the frames is staggered, I'll be curious where that cluster, like how it functions throughout that setup. We'll see. I mean, I'll show everybody.
Maybe what you could do is do a video that you would take pieces of it, I don't know, say every couple weeks or month throughout the late season, going through the winter months, maybe with the thermo camera.
Yeah.
And then it would be a video it'd take you several months to compile. But
Right.
once you did, you could compile it and do dates and show where the cluster's at, as an example for people to understand what happens there.
Yeah. It'd be also, and I have, they're not as accurate as brood minders, but I've got a couple of those Govee sensors they're like those cigar humidor sensors.
Yeah.
And they're very positional. I stopped using them years ago just because of how positional they were.
Sure.
I could even put like a Govee sensor in each, so to say, 5-frame section just to kind of monitor. And I could say like front or like section A, section B, section C. I could always label them and then trend the data. It's just something. I mean, I'm curious about that thing. A lot of people bash ideas before they know anything about it.
Yeah.
It's performed exceptionally well for me.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch.
I like the idea of people trying new things. So people come up to me sometimes and say, well, I've only been keeping bees for 2 years. What do you think about this? And they're like, well, you probably think it's a stupid idea. And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm going to tell you what, the thing that I think is a stupid idea is not presenting an idea. I'm
Right.
like, that's my thought process, because people who are forward thinking are the ones who are going to achieve something great. So if you're very closed-minded, that's going to be a difficult road for you, and you're probably not going to achieve the great things, if you will, and some of these things can be small and little steps, but I don't know. At the end of the day, people are like, I always tell them to come up with an idea, and I'm like, try it and tell me how it works, and I'm like, I would love to understand that, so I don't know. I like it when people come up with ideas that they may seem insignificant, and maybe they don't solve the problem in which they tried to solve, but maybe you come up with a new idea on something else. I don't know. So
yeah. Well, 2 hours, 23 minutes.
Yeah. It's been a good one. It's been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. What
I feel like Tom and I do things a lot the same. I think Tom is more detail oriented than I am, but I think a lot of our principles are the same. So it's been kind of fun to chat about it. Tom, you're a little bit north and west of me, obviously. Mike Berry is my same latitude, and he does a lot of things pretty similar too. But your actual philosophies are very, other than the fact that you use 8-frame boxes, very, very similar as far as how to manage them. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you think going from 8 to 10, that's pretty.
It is a difference, though. If I had to do it all over again, I think I might have started with 8s. But everything I've got how many hundreds of 500 boxes of 10-frame equipment or whatever it is. Like, I've got a lot of boxes, and so there's no way I could.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to just change out now. It's just not worth it to me. And it works fine. It works fine. I'm used to using 10-frame equipment, but 8-frame equipment, I think, would be, I think a double deep 8-frame is about the same as a deep and a medium 10-frame. And so that deep medium 10-frame is about a perfect size, I think, for a brood box, and the double frame 8. But it works out fine. But yeah, it's been fun kind of getting to know you a little better the last few weeks. We've kind of gotten on here a few times and just see that really you run things. You have a very similar philosophy in a lot of ways that I do, the way you do things.
Well, I mean, there's certain things that I found for my own self that seem to work. I'm not saying that every method that I have is perfect.
Absolutely.
Definitely not.
For sure.
I think that as a beekeeper, you need to learn to pivot very quickly. If I go into a bee yard with a certain goal in mind, and say in the springtime, I start to find something else, it can completely cause you to go haywire. But I'm a guy who likes to operate well off of, I have a goal and I'm going to see it through. I know
me too.
That probably aggravates Melissa a little bit. Like today in the bee yard, it was absolutely hot. It was brutal. I was sweating profusely, and I know she didn't want to be out there. I didn't even have to ask, but I won't stop. I just have to fulfill my goals and which I'm going to do. I mean, I could very well be laying on the ground, dragging myself to the pond to try to cool off or something. But I need to check mark those boxes for myself. And that's just how I like to operate. But
I'm that way too, but I've gotten to the point to where my body, I've almost shut down a few times. We talked about that last week on Greg's channel that, at least at my age, I've got to listen to my body or it'll just all get in trouble. So, but I'm the same way. Like, I just like to push on and press through.
Mhm.
But I've done better at like stopping and going. I've started taking a cooler with drinks in it and ice, and so I'll stop for a few minutes and just go get a drink or sit in my truck with the air conditioner on and kind of cool down, and then I've re-energized. Whereas I used to just wouldn't stop. I would just keep going, and
Yeah.
that does help. But
We did that twice today. We stopped and kind of kicked back in the shade. And there was a little bit of a breeze, so it actually wasn't too bad.
when you're in the sun, it's way different than when you're in the shade as well.
Oh,
But
that's for sure.
anyway, it's been great having you on. We appreciate you coming on tonight and filling in for Greg, and did a great job.
We're your channel next week, Bruce.
Yep. That's what I heard.
Good deal.
Who knows what we'll talk about, but hopefully it'll be something interesting to folks, and I'm sure it will be. If we're talking about bees or people are interested, for some reason people are interested in bees, and we usually can get some sort of a crowd on here, and we just appreciate everyone being on here. We've been doing this for 3.5 years. It's amazing to think about that, and
wow,
we still end up with a pretty good crowd every Wednesday night. So and a lot of people have been on here the whole time, and we have a few that jump in new. It seems like every time, so it's pretty fun, pretty cool.
Yeah. Great group of people on here, honestly.
Oh yeah.
Sure. Hey, everybody go and check out Tom's channel, and also Brian, man. Everybody subscribe to Brian's channel too. Let's get those numbers up. Let's get them going.
Where's the thumb? There's the thumb.
Yeah, how about 2 thumbs? 2 thumbs up.
Okay.
We get the stars.
Tom
Where
can't
are they?
do that.
Yeah, no, you guys have all the cool gadgets. So I don't get anything. I just get a bunch of,
all that we're going to see from him. He's going to hold up this, and he's going to catch a shoe.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh, I took my shoes off.
Oh man, a sweaty.
Those shoes up, they could rain shoes down on them instead of sparkles or fireworks.
Yeah.
Shoes raining down.
Yeah,
but it's not the shoes that are my size with her little feet.
But, anyway, as far as here in Alabama, not a whole lot going on right now. I do have to still get my buckets where we had the issue we talked about earlier with the bucket that overflowed, and get them back in the room. And I got to get my superstore. But beyond that, as far as beekeeping goes, if I decide to do some splits, I'll be doing some of that. But otherwise, the bees are kind of tucked in for a little while. But I may do a few splits here and just try to get those empty pallet slots filled. I don't know if I really want to or not, but I just can't stop. So it's just so cool. The bees to me are just the coolest thing. How you can just kind of manage them and manipulate them, and they do their thing, but you can kind of help guide them in the way you want them to go. And man, it's just so cool. So we just appreciate everyone being on here, and just the dog days of summer are upon us, especially here in the next month or two. So we just got to plug through and keep rocking and rolling. I know in certain parts of the country, you guys are just coming up on your harvest time. We're done down here in Alabama. This season starts earlier and it kind of ends earlier. Now we're working towards 2026, but a lot of folks are just in the middle of it or about ready to harvest. And I see a lot of videos and a lot of posts from people that are just harvesting that beautiful liquid gold all over the country. It's pretty neat to see. I just love seeing that, and I love seeing people posting pictures and videos of their bees that are doing well and so strong. And I also, I appreciate folks who post the things that are going wrong, and they kind of, allow us to kind of help kind of commiserate together and work through these things together. But know that we're supporting you and we're behind you wherever you're at, whatever you're going through. This beekeeping community is awesome, and such a great support group, and we appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Well, until the next one, everybody. Like Bruce said, appreciate y'all tuning in, and we will keep chatting about bees. So, Tom, thank you again, buddy.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me on here. It's always a pleasure talking to you guys, and
look at this.
Oh boy, hopefully he wasn't here when I was talking about him.
We got to leave now. We're not going to give him any time to say hi, bye, anything. So y'all take care, and we'll see you next week on Bruce's.
All right.
See you guys. Have a good night.